Imagine a man so cold he could turn London's Thames River into a skating rink just by looking at it. This was Edward Morton, a rigid naval officer who seemed more married to his ship than any woman.
But today, the unthinkable has happened as he stands at the altar, looking at his bride Elizabeth with eyes so full of warmth they could melt an iceberg.
Under the authority of the Queen herself, the two are pronounced husband and wife in what society is calling the most splendid wedding of the year. The bells are ringing and the petals are flying, marking the birth of a truly perfect match between an admiral's son and a parliament member's daughter.
While the guests clap and cheer, the gossip mill is running at full speed behind expensive silk fans.
Everyone is wondering how a man once known as the Ice King of the Navy ended up looking like a lovesick puppy in a tuxedo.
The answer to this mystery is sitting right there in the pews, looking totally unfazed by the spectacle. Her name is Laura Pendleton, the legendary matchmaker who holds the puppet strings of London's high society hearts. As Laura watches the couple, she isn't just seeing a client, she is seeing a young girl she has known for over a decade. For her, seeing Elizabeth and Edward look at each other with such genuine happiness is the ultimate professional victory. The bride has grown from a little girl into a beautiful lady, and now she's heading off to Italy for a romantic honeymoon. It's a fairy tale ending for Elizabeth, but for our matchmaker, the work never truly stops. The scene shifts from the golden wedding hall to a much more stressful dessert table where the atmosphere is anything but sweet. Meet Jane Hyde, a woman who looks like she just saw a ghost instead of a plate of cake.
Jane is in a full-blown panic, practically begging Laura to tell her she doesn't actually have to get married.
It turns out her quiet life of reading and playing cricket has been nuked by a single piece of mail. Jane is the second daughter of the Hyde family, and she's much more comfortable on a horse than in a ballroom.
But her world turned upside down when a man she thought was just a platonic friend decided to drop the M-word in a letter.
The man in question is William Fairfax, and he didn't just hint at his feelings, he sent a formal notice that he's coming to propose in just a couple of days. Jane is reeling, unable to believe that the guy she discussed books with was actually plotting a wedding. On paper, William is the ultimate jackpot for any single lady in the city. He's a self-made trade mogul with his own mansion, vast lands, a handsome face, and a character so clean you could eat off it. Most girls would be throwing themselves at his carriage, but for Jane, this proposal feels like a heavy weight being dropped on her chest. She's not feeling the butterflies, she's feeling the burden of a life she never asked for. She confesses to Laura that she simply isn't ready for this, but she's terrified of the fallout if she says no. She knows William is a good man and breaking his heart would make her feel like a villain. To make matters worse, Jane's family has zero chill. Her mother and uncle already intercepted the letter and are basically picking out flower arrangements. They're ready to push her into this marriage whether she likes it or not, and Jane feels trapped in a corner. Laura gives it to her straight, living as an unmarried woman in this society is a financial and social nightmare. But she also knows that no amount of money or status can fix a heart that isn't in the game. She tells Jane to block out the noise of her family and the expectations of London and just listen to her own heart. She asks the million-dollar question, can Jane actually see herself living with this man for the rest of her life? Speak of the devil, William Fairfax himself appears out of nowhere, catching them right in the middle of their secret meeting. Jane is so flustered she blames her pale face on indigestion and practically runs away to avoid looking him in the eye. After Jane makes her awkward exit, William doesn't miss a beat and turns his full gentlemanly charm toward Laura. He starts by buttering her up, thanking her for lending a rare first edition Dumas novel to his younger sister, Janet. He even invites her to visit them, making it seem like a friendly social call before he pivots to his real objective. Once he's sure the atmosphere is pleasant, he drops the mask of casual conversation and admits he has one more serious favor to ask of London's best matchmaker. The favor involves his famous cousin, Ian Dalton of Whitefield, a man William has known since their childhood days together at Eton.
Ian is set to arrive in London in about a month, and the family is already going into a full-blown matrimonial panic.
William explains that Ian's older sister is so anxious to see him settled that she has practically sent a distress signal. She wants William to use his connections to ensure Laura finds a selection of the most eligible young ladies for Ian to meet the moment he steps foot in the city. While everyone else is busy treating his life like a high-stakes chess game, Ian Dalton himself is looking like he wants absolutely no part of it. He sits alone in his study, brooding over the letters with an expression of pure annoyance. He can't understand why his sister and William are so obsessed with throwing him into the social meat grinder of London society. To this grumpy bachelor, there is nothing special about the city's marriage market, and he clearly intends to be the most difficult client Laura has ever encountered. The story picks back up with Laura diving deep into the file of a man who makes the rest of London society look like amateurs. Meet Ian Dalton, the 30-year-old titan of the Whitefield estate who has a Midas touch so strong he quadrupled his family fortune in record time. Even though Dalton is basically the ultimate golden ticket for any bachelorette, our matchmaker isn't rushing to ring the wedding bells. She openly questions if the man actually wants a wife or if he is just being suffocated by his family's relentless badgering. Instead of a high-pressure setup, Laura plays it smart and suggests that Mr. Fairfax should just introduce Ian as a new friend first. She believes a real spark can only happen if they aren't forced into a corner by formal expectations. Mr.
Fairfax is absolutely thrilled with this low-stakes plan and rushes off to give his sister-in-law the happy update.
Meanwhile, Laura tries to push aside her professional doubts because she has a much more urgent fire to put out regarding Jane Hyde. Laura heads back to the Pendleton family townhouse and finds her grandmother finally looking a bit better than she did earlier that morning. She immediately starts getting ready to spill all the juicy wedding tea from the Morton ceremony. After sneaking into her grandmother's room with a tray of supplies, Laura starts the recount.
The old lady is living for the drama, especially when she hears that the legendary stone-faced Edward Morton actually shed real tears at the altar.
Grandmother can't wait to tease Edward about his emotional breakdown later, but she gives all the credit to Laura. She notes that the couple was clearly pining for each other in secret until Laura stepped in to connect the dots. With at least 10 successful marriages now under her belt, Laura is hailed as the most capable matchmaker in the city. But the light-hearted mood takes a sharp turn when grandmother looks her dead in the eye and asks a question that hits way too close to home. The old lady wants to know why a woman as outstanding and capable as Laura is wasting all her talents on other people's happiness. She asks why Laura isn't out there hunting for her own version of true love.
The conversation gets even heavier when grandmother wonders if Laura is still being haunted by the shadow of the man who abandoned her years ago.
Laura stays silent, her face telling 1,000 stories she refuses to put into words. Sensing the tension, Laura quickly changes the subject and insists that it is getting far too late for a sick woman to be awake. She tucks her grandmother in, effectively shutting down the interrogation about her tragic past. In the quiet solitude of the night, Laura offers up a sincere prayer. She asks for blessings on the newlyweds and guidance for Jane and William, showing that her heart is always focused on the well-being of those around her. She doesn't stop there. She prays for her grandmother's health and then makes a surprising request for the man who left her 12 years ago. Despite the pain he caused, she asks that he be granted peace as she finally whispers amen. The peace is short-lived as a letter arrives from Rosemary Hyde, Jane's sister. The news is a total disaster. Jane officially rejected Mr. Fairfax's proposal, and the fallout has been absolutely catastrophic for the family. The shock of the rejection caused Jane's mother to collapse, and now Jane has locked herself in her room, refusing to see anyone. Rosemary is desperate and begs Laura to come over immediately before things get even worse. Laura rushes to the Hyde residence and is met by a frazzled Rosemary, now known as Mrs. McLean.
But before they can even make a plan, the sound of a screaming voice echoes through the hallway, dripping with pure venom.
Mrs. Hyde is in her room having a full-blown meltdown, shouting that she hates seeing unmarried women cluttering up her house.
But Ta screams that Laura is a haughty, baseless woman who has single-handedly ruined Jane's future.
Rosemary is mortified and tries to apologize, suggesting that maybe today isn't the best time for a visit. But Laura remains calm, acknowledging that the mother's distress is significant even if the words are deeply insulting. As she walks through the house, Laura admits to herself that the insults still sting, even after all this time. She remembers the moment at age 25 when she officially gave up on her own marriage and prepared herself for how society would treat her. She has accepted her role as London's finest matchmaker, which in high society terms is just a fancy way of saying an unsold spinster. She carries this title with a quiet, heartbreaking dignity that most people would never understand. Laura finally reaches Jane's door and knocks softly, hoping her friend is still awake. When she enters, she is horrified to see how gaunt and frail Jane has become in just a few short days. Knowing that Jane hasn't been eating, Laura doesn't lead with a lecture or a matchmaker's pitch. Instead, she brings out a tray of delicious raspberry cookies and offers her company, hoping that a little kindness can break through the darkness. Laura starts this segment by playing nurse and therapist to a completely broken Jane Hyde.
She gently pushes Jane to eat, reminding her that starving herself won't change the past or fix her broken engagement.
To ease the heavy guilt crushing Jane's heart, Laura drops some cold truth about Mr.
Fairfax.
Far from being a sobbing mess, the man was spotted out hunting and enjoying life, proving he has already moved on from Jane's rejection.
Jane isn't convinced and turns the tables, asking Laura if she can actually see a future for herself.
This leads Laura to drop a massive truth bomb. She won't be inheriting the Pendleton estate at all.
Laura explains that giving up her financial future was the high price she had to pay just to be officially recognized as a member of the Pendleton family. She chose a name over gold. Hearing this, Jane spills her own tea about the Hyde family's decline.
She is terrified that once they lose their current home, she and her mother will be exiled to the countryside to live in lonely poverty forever.
At 25, Jane feels like a total failure, regretting her choices and hearing her mother's insults on loop in her head. She's convinced she can't do anything right.
The real fear for an unmarried woman in London isn't just being alone, it's the absolute terror of poverty once the inheritance disappears and the social doors slam shut.
Laura doesn't just pity her, she empathizes because she felt that exact same helplessness when she was Jane's age. She knows the pit of despair all too well, but she also knows the way out. Instead of more empty comfort, Laura switches into career coach mode. She suggests Jane becomes a typist, a role that could actually give her the financial freedom she craves. Laura even offers to lend Jane her own personal typewriter and sets a strict schedule. Jane is to come over to the Pendleton house every evening for 2 hours of intensive typing boot camp. The promise is simple: 3 months of hard work will lead to a real job and a private boarding house where Jane can live independently, far away from her mother's toxic comments. Fast forward 1 month later, and the prodigal son William Fairfax is finally back in London. The city is just as chaotic and noisy as ever, and William is soaking it all in. His cousin, Ian Dalton, is a much tougher nut to crack. Ian is incredibly cynical about the London scene, viewing the elite socialites as nothing more than a bunch of flashy fools and snobs. Even though Ian claims he won't attend any parties, the rumor of his arrival has already set London's social market on fire with a mountain of invitations arriving at their door. William isn't taking no for an answer and insists that Ian must attend the Mortons' ball. He hints that he has already secured a very reliable ally waiting for them there, our favorite matchmaker. Back at the Pendleton house, Laura is feeling uncharacteristically nervous. The rumors of the mysterious Mr. Dalton attending the ball have everyone talking, including her. Her maiden tries to hype her up, suggesting a bold new hairstyle to grab the billionaire's attention.
But Laura, ever the humble professional, thinks the whole idea of him falling for her is ridiculous.
Laura is convinced Dalton will only want the youngest and most beautiful debutantes,
and gently reminds her that she has been by her side for 10 years, and that her beauty has never faded. It has only matured.
Laura arrives at the packed ball and reunites with a slimmed-down William Fairfax. The air is thick with anticipation as they wait for the scene opens with a very stressed William Fairfax pacing the floor while waiting for his star cousin to show up. Ian Dalton is apparently running late because he was busy catching up with his old college squad, but the clock is ticking and the socialites are getting restless. Finally, the man of the hour makes his entrance, and he is a total mood. Ian doesn't even try to hide his annoyance, basically telling William that his prediction was spot on. This whole ball is just a noisy, predictable mess that he'd rather skip. William tries to be the ultimate wingman by offering to introduce Ian to a special lady, but Ian isn't buying it for a second. He immediately suspects his cousin is trying to trap him into another matchmaking scheme and looks like he's ready to bolt for the exit.
Ian starts dropping some serious truth bombs about his cynical view on London's dating scene.
He claims he has yet to meet a single lady who actually has a brain or any wit beyond just being cultured for show. He basically argues that a real relationship is a dead end if the two people can't communicate on a deep level. William just sighs, knowing that the real problem is that Ian is just incredibly difficult to talk to in the first place. The big moment finally arrives when William makes the formal introduction. Ian Dalton is officially presented to our main girl, Laura Pendleton, who happens to be the granddaughter of a powerful countess.
While Laura is internally screaming because Ian is hands down the most handsome man she has ever seen, William is busy selling his cousin as a guy who secretly believes in fate and serious love.
Laura tries to be polite and break the ice by complimenting Ian on being such a great uncle and a devoted brother. But instead of saying thanks, Ian immediately rejects the praise like it's poison. Ian starts painting himself as the villain of the story, explaining that he's only at this ball because his sister, who is recovering from a rough birth, basically forced him to come. He's determined to prove he's not a nice guy. Despite his prickly and defiant attitude, Laura is actually impressed. She notices a unique elegance in the way he carries himself and finds it interesting that he ultimately kept his promise to his sister despite his complaining. She observes that Ian seems to have a weird habit of wanting people to see him as a bad person. Instead of being offended, she interprets this dramatic behavior as a form of extreme, backward humility. Laura pulls a total pro-gamer move and counters his arguments. She points out that the very fact he knows the specific details of his sister's health struggles proves he is actually a top-tier, caring brother. Watching from the sidelines, William is absolutely living for this. He is delighted to see someone finally besting Ian in a battle of wits, marking the first time the Ice King has been speechless. Now that he's officially intrigued by a woman who isn't intimidated by him, Ian asks Laura exactly how she plans to show her friendship while he's stuck navigating the shark-infested waters of London society. Laura makes it very simple. She'll be his dedicated conversation partner, introduce him to her circle of real friends, and keep the vibes going through letters even when he's far away. Touched by her honest and low-pressure offer, Ian drops the act.
He pledges on his honor as a gentleman to be truthful and cooperative with her, forming a brand new and unexpected alliance.
The new partnership hits a massive snag almost immediately. When Laura suggests they hit the dance floor so he can mingle with other ladies, Ian has to drop a bombshell. He never actually learned how to dance.
Fearing a total social disaster, Laura asks William if Ian is at least athletic.
Once she gets the green light, she decides to take matters into her own hands and drags the billionaire toward the stage for an emergency crash course in dancing. The social duel of the season begins as Laura Pendleton invites a very hesitant Ian Dalton to the center of the ballroom. Ian is practically trembling, warning the matchmaker that he is absolutely going to crush her feet more than 3 times because he is that clumsy.
But Laura just gives him a confident smile, telling him she is quite sturdy and ready for the challenge.
As the orchestra begins the melody, Laura gives the billionaire a simple order. Stop overthinking and just follow her feet.
She immediately notices that while Ian is as stiff as a statue, he actually has the natural athletic grace of a sportsman hidden underneath that expensive suit. Even though Ian is slowly catching the rhythm, he is still staring at the floor like he is looking for a lost contact lens. Laura tells him to relax his body because it is impossible to hear the music when he is this tense. She knows that the only way through this social nightmare is for him to finally let go. Ian fires back that if he steps on her, her feet might actually break, but Laura isn't buying the drama. She commands him to lift his head and make direct eye contact with her while they dance. She wants him to focus on her eyes instead of his own clumsy steps. The tension in the air is palpable as Ian finally looks her in the eye and starts to lead the dance properly. Laura gives him a smug look, noting that he has actually adapted to the dance incredibly quickly and that her feet are surprisingly safe for now. Laura questions why he was so stubborn about avoiding dance lessons in the past.
Ian finally admits the simple, hilarious truth. He refused to learn because his only practice partners at school would have been a bunch of sweaty guys.
Because of this, he accepted the title of a rude gentleman who never dances.
Ian continues his self-pity routine, claiming that his bad reputation is actually correct because he can't lead an enjoyable conversation or dance to save his life.
In his own mind, he is the furthest thing from a proper London gentleman.
Laura drops some high society wisdom, telling Ian that being a true gentleman has nothing to do with social skills and everything to do with how someone shows respect to others. Ian argues that he is definitely disqualified then, because he has zero respect for the rigid and fake structures of London society. Laura acknowledges that society can be a source of unbearable frustration and discomfort.
She points out that while Ian finds it annoying, the ladies of the city have it far worse because they are forced into these social traps with no way out.
Moving to a deeper topic, Laura expresses a sincere hope that a person will eventually appear who can share true happiness with Ian. She wants him to find a life based on genuine love rather than social contracts. Ian is taken aback by her sincerity and asks if Laura actually believes in invisible, abstract concepts like soulmates. The matchmaker doesn't hesitate for a second, confirming that she absolutely believes in that deep, romantic bond.
It turns out the Ice King is a secret romantic after all, as Ian admits that he agrees so strongly that he thinks any marriage without love is completely meaningless.
It seems Laura has finally found a client whose heart isn't made of stone. As they continue their waltz, Ian is hit with a very strange feeling.
He realizes he feels an incredible sense of closeness toward Laura, which is remarkable considering they met less than an hour ago.
Laura is also having her own internal realization, deciding that Ian Dalton is a genuinely good man. She finds it rare to meet a gentleman who takes a lady's words as seriously as he does, making her confident that she can become good friends with him.
The crash course in dancing is officially a success, and William Fairfax is overjoyed to see his cousin survive the experience.
Laura prepares to lead Ian toward the next stage of her plan, introducing him to the high-ranking social circle. Laura introduces Ian to several eligible ladies, including the stunning Dora Lance, the daughter of a baronet.
Laura views Dora as the undisputed flower of the social season, and thinks this pairing might be the most perfect match she has ever arranged.
Feeling that her professional duties are finally complete, Laura tells Mr. Fairfax that she is heading home. She has already called for her carriage and politely declines Fairfax's offer for help, looking like a professional who just closed a major deal. As Laura settles into her carriage, she reflects on the potential marriage between Ian and Miss Lance.
She imagines them becoming the most wonderful couple in London, and feels a sense of quiet satisfaction that her work is finished.
But the quiet night is suddenly shattered when the carriage door is gripped by a gloved hand. Laura is caught completely off guard as Ian Dalton comes running out of the ball, shouting her name and looking incredibly flustered. The mission isn't over yet, and Ian clearly has one more thing to say before the night ends.
Just as Laura thinks she is making a clean getaway from the ball, the night takes a wild turn.
She is startled to find the Ice King himself, Ian Dalton, sprinting after her carriage like his life depends on it.
She is left wondering what could possibly be so urgent that a man of his stature would abandon his dignity to chase her down in the street.
Ian catches his breath and immediately hits her with a complaint, telling her it is completely unfair for her to just vanish without a word. He points out that since she was his very first dance partner of the evening, the least she could do was offer a proper goodbye before escaping into the night. Laura is genuinely surprised but keeps her professional composure, apologizing for startling him. She explains that she skipped the formal goodbye because she was already planning for them to meet again very soon, making a final farewell feel unnecessary. She drops the news that her family isn't just about business, they often host relaxed tea parties and intimate musical gatherings.
These events are designed for the young elite to actually enjoy themselves away from the suffocating pressure of massive ballroom crowds.
Ian gets curious about who is actually behind these successful parties, and Laura admits that while her grandmother is officially the hostess, she handles all the management herself. Due to her grandmother's delicate health, Laura is the true architect of their social circle. Suddenly, the man who claimed to despise social events is acting like an eager puppy, suggesting he visit as early as the very next day. Even Laura is shocked by how quickly his icy exterior is melting when it comes to spending more time with her. Laura has to play the voice of reason, mentioning that her doctor is visiting tomorrow so the timing is bad. Ian doesn't hesitate to reschedule, immediately locking in a visit for the day after instead, proving he is dead set on making this happen. As Ian sees her off with a surprising amount of grace, the atmosphere between them changes completely.
Laura realizes this man is a walking contradiction, possessing a hidden graciousness that his prickly reputation never mentioned.
News of Ian Dalton's grand debut at the ball spreads through London like a wildfire in a dry forest. The gossip mills are churning at full speed, as every social circle in the city tries to figure out how to snag the most elusive bachelor in the country. The Lance family is the first to make a tactical move, with the Viscountess cornering her daughter Dora for a debriefing. She wants to know every single detail about the wealthy heir and if the rumors of his charm were actually true. Dora is clearly smitten, telling her mother that Ian is even more impressive in person than the whispers suggested. She proudly reveals that he has already promised to attend their family dinner, making her feel like the queen of the social season. The Lance family gatherings are known for being the most selective and lavish events in London. They are betting everything on Ian because his family wealth is not just massive, it is considered completely indestructible. People whisper that Ian is a financial genius who multiplied his inheritance through savvy moves in mines and railway bonds. He is the kind of jackpot that ensures a family will never go bankrupt, no matter what happens to the economy. Despite her mother's obsession with the land and gold, Dora tries to maintain her romantic ideals. She insists that she won't walk down the aisle for anyone without a genuine spark of attraction and real affection. Her mother loses her patience, warning Dora that being picky is a dangerous game in a city full of hungry rivals. She tells her daughter that if she waits too long for a fairy tale feeling, another maiden will snatch the title of Mrs. Dalton right out from under her. To push Dora into action, the Viscountess starts distorting reality, claiming that Ian's eyes were sparkling only for her. She insists that from a distance, it was obvious he couldn't take his eyes off her beautiful daughter all night. Dora points out the awkward fact that he never actually asked her for a dance and spent all his time with Laura instead. Her mother just scoffs, dismissing Laura as an aging spinster who was merely a safe person for Ian to relax around while he found his footing. Being young and easily influenced, Dora starts falling for her mother's lies and retreats into her own imagination. She begins to believe that Ian is already secretly in love with her and might even be planning a surprise proposal. However, the reality of the social season tells a very different story as the weeks pass. To the shock of the entire city, Ian Dalton consistently ignores the young flowers of society and refuses to leave Laura Pendleton's side at every single gathering. A massive storm is currently battering London, and while every other noble is hiding under their blankets, the Ice King himself makes a move. Ian Dalton shows up at Laura's doorstep looking like a drowned cat, proving that not even a torrential downpour can keep him away from his favorite matchmaker. Laura is genuinely worried about the dangerous journey he took just to see her, but Ian is actually thrilled by the situation.
He thinks the bad weather is a total win because it scared away all the other guests, giving him the chance to spend some quality one-on-one time with her.
As they settle in with some warm tea by the fireplace, the rumors in the city are reaching a boiling point.
Everyone thinks Ian is obsessed with Laura because he is desperate for her to find him a high society wife, but the truth is way more complicated.
The biggest joke of the season is that Ian Dalton doesn't even realize Laura is a professional matchmaker. While the whole town thinks they are working on a marriage contract, he just thinks he's found a genuine friend who actually understands him. From her side of the table, Laura is quietly observing her guest and realizes he has absolutely zero interest in finding a bride.
He's surrounded by the most beautiful and wealthy ladies in London every week, yet he treats them all like background characters in his own story. She notices a pattern. At every single tea party or dinner, Ian will chat with the ladies for exactly 2 minutes before making an excuse to leave. He always ends up right back by Laura's side, either listening to her music or starting a casual conversation that has nothing to do with marriage. Laura concludes that for Ian Dalton, building a sincere friendship with her is way more important than any romantic pursuit. Even if his family is breathing down his neck to get married, he seems perfectly content just sitting in her drawing room. When she asks him about his time in the city, Ian admits that he used to despise London and wanted to run back home immediately. But now, he confesses that he has actually grown quite fond of the place, and he explicitly credits Laura for changing his entire perspective. The conversation shifts to his massive estate, Whitefield, which sounds more like a fantasy kingdom than a piece of land. He describes the fertile forests and birch trees with such vivid detail that Laura feels like she's actually standing there on the hill beside him. Unlike the typical lazy nobles who can't even find their own kitchens, Ian knows every inch of his property. His tone carries a warmth and simplicity that shows a deep, rare love for his homeland that you just don't see in the city elites. Laura is impressed, noting that most landowners couldn't care less about their farms. Ian then drops a bombshell. He wants to show her the beauty of Whitefield through his own paintings. It turns out our grumpy billionaire has been a trained artist since he was a child. He jokes that he uses his own hands as his staff when it comes to art, which leaves Laura completely fascinated. He even expresses regret for not bringing his sketchbook today, which is apparently filled with more than just landscapes. The sketchbook actually contains detailed portraits of his family, including the nieces and nephews he talks about constantly. It's becoming clear that this man isn't cold at all, he's just extremely picky about who he lets into his heart. He shares stories about his eldest nephew, who is currently following in Ian's footsteps by studying at university. He notes how the boy went from being a cute kid to a fine adult, showing a very soft side of the Ice King. Then there's Olivia, his 13-year-old niece who is already preparing to conquer the social scene. Ian seems proud of how capable she is, sounding more like a protective father than just an uncle. The real chaos comes from his younger nephews, Daniel and George, who are basically two energy-filled troublemakers. They fight as a daily routine, and Ian is convinced that he is the only person on Earth who can actually set them straight. The mood turns serious when they talk about the youngest baby in the family. The birth was incredibly hard on Ian's sister, leaving her health in a very fragile state, and he genuinely hopes this child will be her last. Laura is so moved that she decides to send a gift to the newest baby boy. When she asks for his name, Ian gets visibly embarrassed and admits the family named the child Ian Fairfax, after his favorite uncle. Seeing the billionaire Ice King blush over a baby name is the most charming thing Laura has ever witnessed.
She realizes he has a heart of gold, but since he still won't look at any other woman, she decides her only option is to pray he finds love on his own terms.
A few days have passed since the big ball, and the sun is finally shining over London. Our legendary matchmaker, Laura, is being visited by her cheeky maid and while she gets ready for an unexpected outing. Usually, Laura is the one making plans for others, but today, things feel a bit different.
It turns out Laura wasn't even planning to leave the house, but the persistent billionaire Ian Dalton suggested she take a walk to enjoy the perfect weather.
It seems like the Ice King is slowly taking over her schedule, and he is doing it with a surprising amount of gentlemanly charm. While pinning up Laura's hair, and can't help but drop some hot gossip. She points out that Mr. Dalton has been haunting the Pendleton household remarkably often lately. For a man who claimed to hate society, he sure seems to love this specific part of it. And tries to go full fashionista by pushing Laura to wear a super fancy hat, arguing that it highlights the elegant shape of her neck perfectly. She wants her mistress to look like a literal snack for their billionaire guest, but Laura is having none of it. Laura remains the voice of practicality, insisting that a high-fashion hat would look totally out of place for a simple walk.
She reminds him that they aren't going on some royal picnic, so a simple everyday look is more than enough to handle the likes of Ian Dalton.
Sensing a juicy story, and starts teasing Laura, suggesting that Ian must have a top-secret reason for visiting so frequently. She jokes that either he is deeply in love with the Pendleton family chef's cooking, or more likely, he is completely smitten with our girl Laura herself. Laura laughs off the idea as if it's the funniest joke of the century. She is convinced that there isn't a single romantic spark in Ian's eyes. She playfully argues that Ian probably gives more affectionate glances to a plate of expensive steak than he ever gives to her. Laura is a total expert at fixing everyone else's love lives but remains hilariously clueless about her own.
She thinks and is just pretending to be a love expert, while actually knowing nothing, completely ignoring the obvious signs right in front of her face.
As they meet in the parlor, and watches from the sidelines and confirms her suspicions. The moment Laura looks away, Ian's expression shifts from cool and distant to warm and adoring. This man is clearly a goner, and the whole house sees it except for the person it actually matters to. The two begin their walk, noticing how the weather has finally turned from chilly to bright and warm. It's the perfect atmosphere for some deep conversation, and Ian isn't planning to waste a single second of this one-on-one time with his favorite. The talk turns to the Mortons, the couple Laura recently set up. Ian calls them an absolutely adorable match, noting how they perfectly fill in each other's personality gaps. He describes the stoic Edward Morton as someone who was softened beautifully by his new bride. Then comes the moment the music stops. Laura is caught completely off guard when Ian casually mentions that he knows she was the secret matchmaker behind the Mortons' success. He overheard Edward Morton bragging about her in the smoking room, saying he never could have won his wife without her help. Instead of being weirded out, Ian expresses a deep, sincere respect for Laura's work. He notes how rare it is for someone to help others build harmonious homes in a society that usually only cares about gold and social standing. He sees her as a guardian of true happiness. Laura is now a blushing mess and can barely look him in the eye. She struggles to accept such high praise and begs him to stop.
But Ian realizes he isn't a typical gentleman. Instead of changing the subject to save her from embarrassment, he finds himself wanting to keep watching her react to his words.
In a desperate attempt to stop the praise, Laura decides to confess everything. She admits that she was secretly scouting him for a marriage at Mr. Fairfax's request. She reveals that every invitation and even those awkward dancing lessons were all part of a calculated plan to find him a wife.
To her absolute shock, Ian doesn't get angry, he bursts into a fit of laughter.
He reveals the ultimate plot twist: he had already figured out her matchmaking intentions a long time ago.
He knew exactly what she was up to and just chose to enjoy the ride.
Ian tells a stunned and flustered Laura that he actually admires her. Laura opens the conversation by nervously asking Mr. Dalton if he was offended by her secret matchmaking schemes.
To her relief, Ian just laughs it off, telling her he is actually grateful because he knows she was only trying to help him find happiness.
Ian clarifies that it is not that he hates the idea of marriage itself, but rather that he has never found a woman in his hometown of Whitefield who could truly make him open his heart. He wasn't looking for a supermodel or a genius, he was looking for a real connection that just wasn't there. He admits that even though the word destiny sounds a bit too dramatic for his taste, he does believe that there is someone out there specifically meant for him. He wants to believe in a special bond that doesn't feel forced or planned by high society rules. For Ian, the perfect meeting should happen naturally, like a spark in the dark, without any artificial effort or staged introductions. He is a man who wants the real deal or nothing at all. Laura tries to be the ultimate wingman, suggesting that if his destined partner is currently in London, they should stop being passive and start searching more diligently. She enthusiastically offers to use all her resources to find this mysterious lady for him. But then comes the plot twist that leaves Laura speechless. Ian politely but firmly declines her offer, dropping a bombshell by stating that he no longer has any need for her matchmaking services. He looks like a man who has already found exactly what he was looking for. Their intense private moment is suddenly cut short by the arrival of Miss Lance. She claims she was just passing by on a random errand, but her perfect timing and stunning appearance suggest she might have been looking for them all along. Laura notices that Miss Lance is looking especially beautiful today, but there is something different about her. The usually proud and cold socialite is acting with an unusual amount of bashful charm specifically directed at Mr. Dalton. Miss Lance tries to secure Ian's attention by inviting him to all the big events of the upcoming social season. She specifically mentions a fancy picnic that includes boating and swimming, hoping to tempt the billionaire into spending more time with her. Ian is initially non-committal, acting like his schedule is far too busy for a picnic.
However, the moment he confirms that Laura will also be attending, he immediately flips his answer and agrees to go, making his priorities crystal clear to everyone except Laura.
Laura watches this whole interaction with a raised eyebrow.
She is shocked to see the proud and dignified Miss Lance being so forward with a gentleman, and she starts to wonder if this entire romantic interest is completely one-sided.
Once Miss Lance leaves, Laura starts hyping her up to Ian, calling her a lovely, talented, and intelligent lady. She is convinced that any man in London would be the luckiest person on earth to have a woman like Dora by his side. Ian isn't impressed and jokingly remarks that the only real flaw in Laura's social circle is William Fairfax. Laura immediately jumps to her friend's defense, telling Ian that he is being far too harsh on a man of true quality. Laura explains why she considers William the most valuable person she knows. She reveals that despite being rejected by Jane Hyde, William showed incredible kindness by offering to write her a letter of recommendation for a job the moment he heard she needed one. She argues that William values his friendships far more than his own pride, which is a rare trait in their world.
Ian finds this behavior unusual but admits it is admirable. And Laura reminds him that they are only friends because William cared enough to introduce them.
As they arrive back at the Pendleton residence, the planning for the picnic continues. Laura suggests that William should definitely join them, and Ian playfully suggests that they should make William the coachman and the boatman just for the fun of it. Ian declines a tea invitation to go handle his letters, but before he disappears, he drops a question that completely changes the vibe. With a serious and pointed look, he asks Laura if William Fairfax has ever tried to court her in the past. It seems the Ice King has finally found his first rival. The air between Laura and Ian is thick with a tension you could slice with a butter knife. Ian Dalton drops a question that is basically a social nuclear bomb. He wants to know if William Fairfax has ever tried to win Laura's heart. Laura is momentarily frozen, her brain struggling to process why the billionaire Ice King would even go there. Laura snaps out of it and sets the record straight with zero hesitation.
She reminds Ian that Jane Hyde is her absolute best friend, making any romance between her and William not just improper, but a complete betrayal of trust.
She is shocked that he would even imagine such a scandalous scenario.
She firmly rejects the idea, explaining that given the history between Jane and William, a courtship with her would be entirely unthinkable.
She makes it clear that her loyalty to her friends is worth more than any social climbing or romantic drama. Ian's reaction is surprising. He looks incredibly relieved by her firm rejection and makes a quick exit before the conversation gets any weirder.
Laura is left standing by the gate, staring after him and wondering what was really behind that sudden burst of curiosity.
Later that night, Laura finds herself analyzing the dynamic between Ian and Miss Lance. She's seen Dora be incredibly assertive and forward, yet Ian's responses are consistently as dry as a desert. She can't help but feel that there is a massive wall between them that no amount of flirting can climb.
The matchmaker in her wonders if Ian is just wearing a mask of indifference to hide his true feelings, or if Miss Lance is completely misreading his politeness.
She starts to worry that Dora is misunderstanding his detached responses as a sign of secret affection.
Laura realizes that while Miss Lance is a wonderful lady, she might lack the real-life experience to see through flattery and social masks. She begins to think it might be better if those two stayed apart, doubting Dora's ability to handle a man as complex as Ian.
Despite her internal doubts, Laura has to admit that on paper, they are a power couple. Dora has the noble title, and Ian has the mountains of gold.
It's a match made in social heaven, and as the person who introduced them, Laura feels a crushing responsibility to watch this story unfold.
She accepts that her current job is to keep a watchful eye on their interaction. Even if the emotional spark is missing, the social conditions are too perfect to ignore, and she must remain the professional observer of London's high-stakes marriage market. A few days later, the scene shifts to the quiet Pendleton estate. While everyone else in London is busy getting wasted at Baron Bailey's party, Jane Hyde arrives for her secret mission. She's officially chosen a typewriter over a ballroom, and she's not looking back.
Laura admits she much prefers the quiet sanctuary of her library and taking care of her grandmother over the fake smiles of high society.
She's built her own world within these walls, and today, she's setting an even higher typing target for Jane to reach. Looking back, Laura remembers Jane's initial awe at the vast collection of books in the library. She recalls the moment she first handed Jane that second-hand typewriter, a tool she once bought for herself during a time of deep personal uncertainty when she needed a way to survive. Laura shares a bit of her own history, admitting she put herself through rigorous training.
Even though traditional office work eventually proved to be a bad fit for her, she realized that having a high-level skill is the ultimate insurance policy for a woman's independence.
Jane is full of gratitude, telling Laura that while her strict lessons were absolute torture at first, they have completely rebuilt her confidence. She's no longer the girl hiding from society, she's becoming a woman who can actually envision a future where she earns her own way. The vibe changes when Jane notices what Laura is actually writing. It's not some fluffy poem or a letter, it's a stack of complex Latin texts that would make a university professor sweat.
Jane realizes her mentor is on a completely different level of intellectual power than anyone suspected.
Jane is stunned to discover that Laura can read the original Greek versions of classics like the Iliad and the Odyssey. While most girls' schools only teach enough German or French to be polite, Laura has mastered the ancient languages that are usually reserved only for men at Oxford. Jane finally sees the big picture. Laura Pendleton isn't just a matchmaker, she's preparing to become a high-level tutor for university aspirants.
Behind that elegant exterior, she is fighting a fierce battle for her own independence, proving she is the ultimate queen of her own fate.
The scene opens with a heart-to-heart between Jane and our resident genius, Laura Pendleton. Jane is genuinely confused why someone as brilliant and fluent in French as Laura is still hitting the books so hard.
She thinks Laura's current skills are more than enough to land a top-tier job as a governess in any wealthy household.
Laura drops a dose of cold reality on the table, explaining that teaching girls is one of the most unstable jobs in London. She knows that the moment a family hits a financial bump, the daughter's education is the first luxury to get chopped. It's a cutthroat market where security is just a fairy tale. This is why Laura is playing the long game by mastering ancient languages. By specializing in Latin and Greek, she can tutor boys, which pays significantly more and offers the kind of job security a governess can only dream of. She's not just working, she's building a fortress for her future. Jane is floored when she hears Laura's ultimate retirement plan. Instead of looking for a husband to save her, Laura intends to work as a private tutor until she has enough saved up to disappear into a quiet life in the countryside. She's officially chosen peace and books over the social meat grinder. The talk shifts to the season's hottest invite, Miss Lance's upcoming picnic. Jane is a bit awkward about it since she barely knows the hostess, but it turns out there's a secret puppet master behind her invitation. Our girl Laura pulled some major strings to get Jane and William Fairfax on the guest list. Laura isn't just being nice, she's a strategic genius. She believes that repairing the broken bond between Jane and William will make Jane's future job search way easier. Plus, she wants her friend to have one last moment of actual fun before the real grind of working life begins. The day of the picnic finally arrives, and the London elite are gathered in all their silk and lace glory. Everyone is buzzing with excitement, but the real drama is in the seating chart. Miss Lance is running the show with an iron fist, organizing the travel arrangements to her exact liking. Miss Lance pulls a tactical move, banishing all the gentlemen to the coachman's seats on the outside of the carriage while the ladies are tucked safely inside the main cabin. It's a move designed to keep the girls talking and the men working, but one person is definitely not feeling the vibe. Meet the king of disappointment, Ian Dalton.
The billionaire heir looks like he just lost a gold mine when he realizes he won't be riding in the same carriage as Laura.
He's stuck on the roof while his target is inside, and his grumpy face is basically a permanent resident at this point. While Ian sulks, William Fairfax steps up like the ultimate gentleman to help the ladies board. Seeing an opportunity, Ian decides to quit moping and use the long journey to build some rapport with the rest of Laura's social circle. If he can't be with her, he'll at least win over her friends. Onlookers from other carriages can't stop whispering about the other socialites corner Ian, asking why he's been ghosting the Lance residents lately. Ian plays it cool, claiming that some urgent family matters kept him away, but his eyes say he'd rather be anywhere else than answering these annoying questions from the gossip squad. The gossip train moves on to the Pendleton house, and the city girls are being total mean girls. They dismissively label Laura's home as the most boring place in London because it focuses way too much on. Even though they have to admit the food at Laura's house is top tier, they immediately pivot to the nastiest topic in high society, her lack of a dowry. They mock the fact that despite her legendary beauty and family name, she's basically in. The whispers get even darker as the women speculate on why the wealthy Pendleton family refuses to give Laura a single cent for her marriage. They start hinting that there's a massive, hidden scandal involving Laura's mother that makes her a social liability despite her looks. Just as a curious woman named Daisy is about to get the full, juicy details of the scandal, the group leader sharply silences her. The mystery of Laura's past is hanging in the air like a heavy cloud, and it's clear that the matchmaker herself is walking into a social minefield.
Just when you think our matchmaker is the most perfect lady in London, society decides to drop a massive reality check.
The elite squad has officially arrived at a scenic picnic spot, and while the ladies are busy setting up mats and dreaming about boat rides, there is a literal storm of gossip brewing under the surface. While the other girls are focused on their dresses and the snacks, Ian Dalton is acting like a man possessed. He is constantly scanning the crowd, his eyes locked onto Laura Pendleton like a laser. He looks deeply troubled, and it's not because of the weather, it's because of the nasty whispers he heard about her during the long carriage ride.
Ian isn't the type to sit around and wait for the truth to find him.
He decides to go straight to the source of the rumors and approaches the resident social queen, Miss Dora Lance.
He asks her for a private walk, and Dora is practically vibrating with secret joy, thinking she has finally secured her billionaire proposal.
As the two of them step away from the group, the rest of the ladies are losing their minds with excitement.
They are convinced that they are about to witness the romantic confession of the century, but in reality, Ian is about to perform a high-stakes interrogation. Ian wastes zero time on small talk and goes for the jugular. He asks Miss Lance to explain exactly what everyone was whispering about regarding Laura's family history.
He makes it clear that he values his friendship with Laura so much that he needs to know the truth for the sake of their future.
Miss Lance takes a deep breath and starts the tragic tale of the Pendleton family jewel. She reveals that Laura's mother was once the most celebrated and beautiful girl in all of London society. She had the world at her feet until she suddenly vanished without a trace at the age of 17. The plot twist is revealed: the high society jewel didn't just disappear, she eloped in the middle of the night with an American painter. This guy had been hired to paint her family's portrait, but he ended up stealing the daughter's heart and her entire future instead. The forbidden couple lived a life of hiding and poverty without ever having a proper wedding. But the story takes a dark and heartbreaking turn when Laura's mother passed away while giving birth to her only daughter. The social jewel was gone, leaving behind nothing but a scandalous legacy and a tiny baby. After the funeral, the American painter pulled the ultimate villain move. He left the infant on the doorstep of Lady Abigail and vanished from the face of the earth.
Most people in London are convinced that he just abandoned his child so he could go back to his own life and forget the whole tragedy.
Even though Lady Abigail officially adopted Laura back into the Pendleton fold, Miss Lance can't help but drop some fake pity. She tells Ian it's such a shame that a woman as graceful as Laura has to carry the heavy burden and the stain of her own birth everywhere she goes. Dora tries to act like a loyal friend, insisting that despite her crazy background, Laura's character is so great that she still fits perfectly within the upper class. It's the kind of backhanded compliment that only a high society rival could pull off with a straight face. Then comes the gold digger update, the missing dowry. Miss Lance explains that the reason Laura doesn't have a single cent to her name is because of a brutal family feud. When Laura was adopted, her uncle wasn't about to let the inheritance go to a scandalous orphan.
To save the family name and secure Laura's safety, Lady Abigail had to sign a soul-crushing contract.
She agreed that every single one of her assets would pass to the uncle's son, leaving Laura with a noble name but absolutely zero financial backing for a marriage.
Miss Lance finishes her story by begging Ian not to judge Laura for her mixed bloodline or her poverty.
She tries to sound virtuous, but she's really just highlighting all of Laura's weaknesses to make herself look like the better option for the billionaire heir. But Ian Dalton isn't following the script. He looks visibly offended and disgusted, not by Laura, but by the idea that he would ever care about something as trivial as money or birth circumstances.
He realizes that the graceful matchmaker has been fighting a very lonely battle all her life.
After thanking Miss Lance for the info, Ian rejoins the group but looks like a man on a mission. He declines to play their petty social games, choosing instead to reflect on the real reason he decided to stay in London. It seems the Ice King has finally found something worth fighting for, and society better get ready for the fallout. The past month has turned our once cool billionaire Ian Dalton into a total puppy. He's been circling around Laura Pendleton like a man possessed, constantly looking for any excuse to hear her speak just one more word. It's official, the Ice King has been downgraded to a full-time simp.
For the first time in his life, Ian is starting to realize that he's actually captivated by another human being.
He's usually the one in control, but right now, he's just a guy wandering around the park hoping for a glance from his favorite matchmaker.
But his romantic vibes quickly turn into pure annoyance when he thinks about the rest of London's high society.
He's completely done with these snobs who look down on Laura just because her family name doesn't come with a mountain of gold. To Ian, the primary entertainment for the elite seems to be nothing but vulgar gossip and low-tier slander. He can't stand how they treat people's lives like a cheap soap opera while ignoring the actual quality of a person's heart.
As he watches Laura's quiet and humble behavior, he starts to wonder if she's only this way because she spent years enduring the cold shoulder of society all on her own.
He suspects her calm demeanor is actually a shield built from years of being treated like an outsider. This triggers Ian's hero complex, making him wish he could be her ultimate source of comfort. He desperately wants her to trust him enough to stop hiding her wounds and finally let him see the real woman behind the matchmaker mask. His deep, emotional reflections are suddenly shattered by the sound of someone counting loudly by the lake. He wanders over and finds William and Jane Hyde engaged in the most competitive game of skipping stones you've ever seen. William sees his cousin and immediately tries to drag him into the chaos, asking Ian to join the game and bet on his success. William is feeling way too confident for a guy who is clearly about to get wrecked. Ian takes one look at the situation and decides to pull the ultimate traitor move by betting against his own family. He immediately places his money on Miss Hyde, sensing that her stone-skipping skills are on a completely different level than William's clumsy attempts. He even goes a step further by playfully suggesting that Jane probably let William win the last round on purpose just to save his fragile ego. This cheeky comment immediately triggers a direct challenge from Jane, who is now ready to prove her dominance. Jane is radiating absolute confidence, telling Ian she's going to crush him just as easily as she handled William. Ian tries to play it cool, but he admits that facing a literal stone-skipping master is actually making him a bit nervous. Just when things couldn't get more dramatic, Laura shifts the stakes by betting her money on Ian. She tells the group she's trusting his natural athleticism to pull through, finally giving our billionaire the motivation he needs to actually try. Feeling the pressure to defend his honor in front of Laura, Ian spends a significant amount of time picking out the absolute perfect stone. He prepares to unleash skills he hasn't used since his school days, looking like he's about to enter an Olympic competition. Ian's throw is a total masterpiece, with the stone dancing across the water for a staggering 38 skips. It's an incredible bar for the competition, and for a second, it looks like the Ice King might actually win this thing. But Jane Hyde says hold my tea and proceeds to absolutely dominate. She focuses all her strength and sets a spectacular new record of 40 skips, proving once and for all that she is the undisputed queen of the lake. Ian isn't a sore loser, he gracefully admits defeat and bows to the champion. He acknowledges that he's finally met a worthy and extraordinary opponent in the seemingly quiet and humble Miss Hyde.
With the game over, Laura decides it's time for a vibe shift and suggests they enjoy the perfect weather with a relaxing boat ride.
She knows exactly how to transition from high-stakes competition to a more romantic atmosphere. As Ian and Laura settle into the tiny, intimate boat, the rest of the world just seems to fade away. They are finally alone with nothing but the sound of the wind and each other's company, leaving us on a massive romantic cliffhanger. Imagine being a fly on the wall at this picnic, watching Jane Hyde and William Fairfax interact like absolutely nothing happened.
The local gossip squad is completely losing their minds, wondering how a girl who just shot down a billionaire's proposal can act so comfortable and relaxed around him.
It turns out our guy William is a total pro at managing awkward vibes. He was the one who suggested the stone-skipping game specifically to break the ice and turn a potentially cringy encounter into a high-stakes friendly competition.
Watching them from the sidelines, our girl Laura realizes that their bond was always built on being great friends first.
She starts to suspect that William's proposal wasn't even fueled by some crazy, deep passion, but rather a simple desire for a reliable life partner. This insight triggers a massive philosophical debate for Ian Dalton.
He starts to question if a marriage can ever actually be happy if it's just based on being buddies rather than having a burning romantic fire between the two people.
Laura drops some major truth bombs about the reality of adulting, explaining her pragmatic view of life.
She argues that in the long run, mutual trust and a steady hand are way more important than the wild and unpredictable nature of temporary passion. She even warns him that the beautiful flower of love usually shrivels up the second it hits the cold reality of empty bank accounts or clashing personalities. For her, a stable friendship is the ultimate survival kit in a world full of social drama. Ian is completely taken aback by her cynical take on romance, finding it way too dull for his taste. He argues that a life lived without that spark of passion is basically just going through the motions in a lukewarm and boring world. He doubles down on his romantic ideals, telling her that true love is the only thing worth fighting through any hardship for. For a man like him, when love hits, it's meant to last until the very end. But things get real spicy as they sit close together in that tiny boat. Suddenly, the billionaire Ice King is hit with a wave of intense physical attraction to Laura that he never saw coming. The atmosphere shifts from intellectual debate to pure, unadulterated tension.
Ian is out here fighting for his life, struggling to keep his cool while his brain is screaming at him to just reach out and touch her.
Every time she looks at him, he has to suppress the urge to close the distance and give her a kiss right there on the lake. Laura is totally oblivious to the storm raging inside him, only noticing that Ian has suddenly turned as pale as a ghost. She gets genuinely worried and asks if he's feeling sick, completely unaware that she is the reason for his rapid heart rate. Seeing him break into a cold sweat, she insists they get off the boat immediately so he can rest. Her caring and supportive nature only makes things worse for poor Ian, who is now even more flustered by her kindness.
As they finally settle onto a rock by the shore, Ian realizes he is in a dangerous spot.
He knows that if he keeps looking at her while they are alone like this, he might finally lose his grip on his self-control and do something scandalous. To save the day, Laura changes the subject and asks if the massive forests in his hometown of Whitefield look anything like the local park. It's the perfect distraction for a man who is currently about to overheat. Ian describes his home as a forest paradise filled with beautiful birch trees, a massive contrast to the pathetic and sparse greenery found in the middle of London. He paints a picture of a world where nature actually has room to breathe. While half the countryside is dying to move to the city, Laura admits she's done with the noise. She finds the high-fashion social scene of London to be nothing but an exhausting and loud headache that she'd gladly trade for some peace. Ian goes full romantic again, confessing that the quiet outdoor vibes make him never want to step foot in the chaotic city again. He looks at her with a look that says everything, wishing they were at Whitefield Hall right now so she could wander through his forests and finally get the rest she deserves. Imagine being a billionaire who owns half the country but still can't get a single date with the woman of your dreams. Ian Dalton finally decides to stop being a coward and extends a warm invitation to Laura, telling her she is welcome at Whitefield Hall anytime she wants to escape the noise of the city. He even tries to sweeten the deal by saying the house is so quiet that even the servants are dying for a new guest to entertain. Laura, ever the polite professional, thanks him for the kind offer and admits she would love to see the land he loves so dearly with her own eyes someday.
For a second, Ian thinks he's finally winning, but our matchmaker is about to drop a social logic bomb that will change everything.
She adds a massive, pragmatic catch to the invitation: she'll only visit once Ian finally finds a lady of the house to act as a proper hostess. Ian tries to act all modern and playful, asking if a wife is really that necessary for a simple house visit, but Laura isn't playing around. She points out the cold, hard social reality of their era. It would be a total scandal for an unmarried woman to visit the private home of a single gentleman living all by himself. Ian sighs, realizing that his bachelor pad is officially off limits as long as he stays single. Laura goes for the kill by telling him she is actually looking forward to the day she gets his wedding invitation. She starts painting a beautiful picture of him and his future wife at Whitefield Hall, completely unaware that she's currently stabbing him in the heart with every word. Ian doesn't give up and promises that once he finds his bride, he'll force her to give her word that Laura can stay at the hall for as long as she pleases. He's basically trying to bribe a future wife he hasn't even met yet just to keep Laura in his life. Laura just laughs it off like it's the funniest joke of the century. She warns him that in the real world, no wife is going to be cool with her husband's beautiful female friend hanging around the house forever. The logic is sound, but Ian is done with logic. The vibe gets incredibly heavy when Ian asks what would happen if the future misses. Dalton specifically begged for Laura to stay by her side forever.
He's practically screaming the truth at her now, but Laura is still trying to play it safe behind social rules.
Ian finally snaps and drops all pretense. He looks her dead in the eye and confesses that if he were to ever marry anyone, she is the only person he can possibly imagine as the mistress of Whitefield Hall. This is it, the big proposal we've all been waiting for. But instead of a romantic movie moment, Laura gets completely flustered and shuts him down instantly. She insists that his future wife would hate this arrangement and firmly asks him to only ever invite her as a friend. She basically hits him with the ultimate friend zone card and makes a tactical retreat before he can say another word. Left alone in the wind, Ian starts reeling from the realization that his impulsive proposal was a total disaster.
He realizes he was completely rejected, and he feels like a total fool for pushing his one-sided feelings on her so blindly. He beats himself up, thinking he practically begged her to turn him down.
But even with the pain of rejection, he admits to himself that he's been visualizing this life with Laura ever since he first stepped foot in London. Ian decides he can't let things end like this. He resolves to track her down and explain the true depth of his love, hoping that if she sees his sincerity, she might actually give him a chance. But the universe has other plans for our desperate billionaire. When he goes to look for her, he finds out that Laura pulled a disappearing act and left the area in a massive hurry. Apparently, she cited an urgent matter at home and vanished faster than a paycheck on rent day. Ian gets the news that the Pendleton house is officially on lockdown. They aren't receiving any guests because a mystery relative is coming to visit, which is basically code for saying they don't want to see his face. The next day, Ian tries his luck at the Pendleton gates, but he gets flatly turned away by the staff. They won't even accept a letter from him, which in high society is the ultimate middle finger to his dignity. As evening falls, the mighty Ian Dalton is left standing alone in the street, facing a total and complete blackout from the woman he loves. The billionaire has everything, but right now, he can't even buy a conversation with his own matchmaker.
It has been a full week since that disastrous picnic, and our billionaire protagonist Ian Dalton is officially losing his mind.
He has gone from being the most eligible bachelor in the country to a frantic man barred from the only house he actually wants to enter. The pride of the Ice King is completely gone, replaced by the sheer desperation of a man who was ghosted by his own matchmaker. Every single day, Ian shows up at the Pendleton residence like a persistent ghost, only to be turned away at the door by the staff. He is left to wander the streets nearby like a lost puppy, unable to even catch a glimpse of Laura's shadow behind the curtains.
He is haunted by the terrifying thought that Laura's heart has officially locked its doors and thrown away the key.
He worries that his impulsive proposal caused a permanent fracture, making their relationship completely irreversible.
The fear of losing her forever is a nightmare that keeps him awake every night.
Ian's internal chaos is so obvious that he looks like a man on the edge of a breakdown. When someone finally approaches him to mention how weirdly he's been acting, Ian is so startled he literally shouts in surprise.
He is no longer the composed gentleman everyone feared, he's just a mess of raw nerves and regret.
Just as he thinks things can't get any more complicated, a sudden telegram arrives that completely ruins his plans.
The message forces a change in his schedule, meaning he has to leave London immediately. This telegram triggers one final, frantic attempt to reach Laura before he is forced out of the city. Back at the Pendleton gates, the standoff continues. The staff stands firm on their orders, refusing to let him inside or even take an item from his hands. It's a total blackout, and Ian is running out of options and time. With only 30 minutes left before his train departs, Ian's desperation hits an all-time high. He tries to pressure the staff member into making just one tiny exception for his urgent delivery. He is practically begging for a chance to leave something behind for Laura so he doesn't disappear without a trace. He even goes as far as offering the servant a luxury job in Yorkshire if they get fired for helping him. However, his billionaire flex fails completely because the servant values the excitement of the city way more than a boring life in the countryside. The Yorkshire dream just isn't enough to buy loyalty in London. In his final attempt to secure the delivery, Ian tries to throw money at the problem with a bribe.
But the staff member has a much bigger price in mind.
They refuse the cash in exchange for a massive personal favor that money can't buy. The servant challenges Ian with a bold request. He must promise to return to London and successfully win Laura's heart. They want him to man up and keep fighting for his love rather than giving up so easily. It's a challenge that Ian accepts with a renewed sense of purpose as he rushes to his train. After Ian's hurried exit, and finally brings a mysterious bundle to Laura. She admits she couldn't help but accept it because the gentleman was acting like a total lunatic and wouldn't take no for an answer. The package is heavy with expectation as Laura begins to unwrap it. Laura opens the letter and discovers the dark reason for Ian's sudden departure. He has been called back to Whitefield because Reverend Genfield has passed away. It's not a romantic getaway, it's a grim matter of duty that requires his immediate attention. As the primary landowner, Ian explains that he is responsible for appointing the next reverend and must oversee the entire mourning process.
His departure is a heavy burden of responsibility, but even in the middle of a family tragedy, his mind is still stuck on the woman he left behind.
In his letter, Ian admits he is well aware that Laura has been intentionally avoiding him since the day of the picnic. He doesn't blame her, but he also doesn't plan on letting the silence continue forever. He expresses a sincere and humble hope that the bridge of friendship between them hasn't been burned to the ground. He asks for just one chance to explain himself and his feelings properly the moment he returns to London. He signs it as her loyal friend, but the gift included says something much deeper. Along with the letter, Ian left behind a stunning painting of his territory, Whitefield. It's a work of art that captures the soul of his home, and the quality is so high it leaves Laura completely breathless. By sharing the most intimate part of his life through his art, Ian is revealing his true intentions without saying a single word. To the total surprise of the maid, Laura gives a very specific instruction. Instead of hiding the painting away, she wants it hung in the most visible spot in the drawing room.
As Anne carries the painting away, she is left wondering what kind of secret bond has formed between the matchmaker and the Ice King to deserve such a prime spot in the house.
And slowly slips into the room and finds Laura still glued to that mysterious letter for what feels like the 100th time.
The matchmaker is supposed to be getting ready for bed, but her mind is clearly light years away. The maid is practically burning alive with curiosity, wondering what could possibly be written in those pages to make her mistress so intense.
She starts imagining a spicy love confession or maybe even a full-blown marriage proposal. And notes that Laura's expression is way too gloomy for someone who just received a love letter. She wishes Laura would be a bit more loose-lipped like the gossipy girls from other households instead of keeping everything locked inside. Laura finally breaks the silence and drops a nuclear bomb by admitting that Ian Dalton basically proposed to her. And nearly jumps out of her skin in excitement, unable to believe the Ice King finally made his big move. It turns out our legendary matchmaker has been ghosting every guest in London because she simply does not know how to handle a billionaire's heart. Her strange behavior lately was just a shield to hide her total internal chaos. When Anne asks if she plans to say yes, Laura delivers a cold dose of reality by confirming her intention to reject him. She is determined to push him away despite the magnitude of his offer. Laura argues that Ian's high society circumstances and her own lack of a dowry make this a recipe for disaster. She believes that if a gentleman is free to propose, a lady should have the absolute right to protect him from a bad match by refusing. She tries to act logical, claiming she is well past her prime and completely penniless. To her, a marriage built on fleeting emotions without a solid financial foundation is just a house of cards waiting to fall.
Laura thinks Ian is just acting on a temporary spark, and ignores the fact that he definitely knows about her lack of money.
She insists that living together requires more than just romance, showing her trademark pragmatic side. And isn't buying any of these excuses and asks the million-dollar question, forget the money and the status, what does Laura's heart actually feel for him? The silence that follows is louder than any confession. Laura tries to cope by claiming the biggest advantage of being a spinster is that you can be friends with hot guys without any romantic tension. She is working overtime to convince herself that she has zero love for him in her heart.
After Anne leaves, Laura looks at the letter again and realizes how neat and polite his writing is, even after she treated him like a ghost.
She admits to the empty room that Ian is truly a good man who followed through on every promise.
An internal monologue kicks in as Laura wonders when this dangerous attraction even started. She admits she never initially thought of him as a suitor, because she was so convinced she wasn't suited to be his wife.
She feels a twisted sense of relief that he is leaving the city, hoping that the distance will make her feelings subside.
She desperately wants to go back to being just a loyal friend once he sorts out his emotions. The narrator calls her out for being a total liar because her heart actually sank the moment she heard he was leaving. She has been wanting to see him all week, and this unfulfilled wish is now bringing her nothing but pain as she holds onto her locket. With a total heartbreaker of a hook. 7-year-old Laura is standing in the rain as her father says a tearful goodbye, promising that this isn't the end and he will definitely come back for her someday. It's the kind of trauma that stays with you forever, especially when your world is about to be turned upside down. Before he vanishes into the mist, her father gives her a golden pendant to wear around her neck as a symbol of their unbreakable bond. He assures her that even if they are apart, the spirits of her mother and father will always be right there by her side, tucked inside that tiny piece of jewelry. Young Laura is left in the care of the prestigious Pendleton family, where her grandmother, Lady Abigail, is the only person who treats her with actual warmth. The old lady looks at Laura and sees her departed daughter all over again, doing everything in her power to help the child forget her crippling loneliness. But the honeymoon phase doesn't last long because the actual head of the house, Uncle Gerald, is a total nightmare.
To him, his little niece is nothing but a shameful reminder of a family scandal that brought dirt onto the Pendleton name.
He treats her like an unwanted leftover instead of blood.
Gerald is the type of villain who throws a temper tantrum at his own mother for accepting such a niece into their home.
Their daily screaming matches become the background music of Laura's childhood, and poor Laura is usually the target of his rage whenever she's unfortunate enough to catch his eye. Things get even darker as we see that the abuse wasn't just verbal. The guy actually threw objects and beat a literal child just to vent his anger. Hiding quietly and avoiding her uncle becomes Laura's daily routine, and she spends 3 years walking on eggshells just to stay in one piece.
Finally, Lady Abigail realizes that the main house is basically a war zone, and decides to send 10-year-old Laura away to a boarding school for her own safety.
It's a bittersweet move because she's leaving the only person who loves her, but at least she's escaping the monster in the parlor. Even at school, the gossip squad is already hard at work, spreading rumors about her scandalous birth before she even puts her bags down.
But Laura is a different breed. She doesn't cry or crumble.
Instead, she uses her isolation as fuel and buries herself so deep in her books that she makes everyone else look like amateurs. Through sheer force of will and some serious brainpower, she consistently ranks at the top of her class. She carefully crafts a persona of the perfect, kind-hearted honor student, building a flawless mask to hide the fact that she's constantly enduring the weight of her family's cold social circle. While Laura is dominating the classroom, her grandmother is fighting a desperate legal war to officially register her in the family. To win the battle against the greedy uncle, Abigail has to make the ultimate sacrifice. She signs a contract giving her entire inheritance to Gerald's son just so Laura can officially use the Pendleton name. At 17, Laura graduates and is finally introduced to London's high society, but the aristocratic elite have long memories for scandal.
Despite her beauty and her name, she is never fully accepted, and is forced to spend over a decade reminding herself that she is a permanent outsider just to survive the social vitriol.
Fast forward to the present, and our matchmaker is alone with Ian's letter, finally admitting to the empty room that she actually has deep feelings for the billionaire Ice King. After a lifetime of protecting her heart, she's finally fallen for the one man who shouldn't be hers.
But because she's the queen of overthinking, she decides their love is a massive mistake.
She's terrified that her controversial status and her lack of a dowry will become a permanent obstacle that only brings pain to their future children. She believes that for his sake, they should just give up now. Miles away at Whitefield Hall, the man in question finally returns home. He's just finished overseeing the quiet funeral of Reverend Jen Field, looking exhausted and carrying a silent heartbreak that no one in his estate can see. Even with his own world falling apart, Ian stays focused on his duties as the lord of the land. He orders his staff to clean up Hartnham Cottage and prepare it for the Reverend's grieving family, making sure they are treated with the utmost consideration during their loss. Ian even takes the time to check on his head servant Ramswick, asking about his knee and apologizing for being away for so long. He's the perfect master, but as he disappears into his study, the air around him feels heavier than ever before. We end on a classic cliffhanger with the servants whispering in the hallways. They are absolutely stunned that their master stayed in the city for so long and still came back without a bride. They have no idea that the Ice King actually tried his best, but the woman he loves is currently busy building a wall around her heart. Back at Whitefield Hall, the mighty Ian Dalton is facing his greatest enemy yet, a desk that looks like a paper factory exploded. He has been away for less than 2 months, but the administrative work has already piled up into a literal mountain. Turns out, the estate doesn't run itself while the boss is busy chasing a matchmaker in London. The real explosion happens when Ian actually dives into the land management documents.
Things are in a much worse state than he initially feared because his managers were basically sleeping on the job while he was pining away.
It's a total disaster area, and the billionaire is definitely not impressed with the mess he found.
He discovers a massive betrayal. The land managers were not only lazy and negligent, but were also busy padding their pockets with bribes behind Ian's back.
They thought they could rob the boss while he was distracted by love, but the Ice King is officially awake and he's ready to bring the hammer down.
Ian doesn't hesitate and fires the corrupt manager on the spot, even mocking his own brother-in-law's terrible judge of character for recommending such a fool. After the firing spree, he finally finds a moment of peace in his office, but while the noisy memories of London are fading, the image of one specific lady refuses to leave his head.
Ian stands there wondering what Laura is doing at this exact second.
In his imagination, he sees her sitting at a grand formal dinner or maybe being swept off her feet on a ballroom floor. He's going full obsessive mode, convinced that whatever guy is currently dancing with her is the luckiest man on the planet. He imagines her standing by a window just like he is, looking at the same sky and feeling a similar yearning for a certain billionaire. He's acting like a romantic poet, desperately hoping she feels even a fraction of the pull that's currently making his own chest feel tight. But then reality hits him like a bucket of ice water as he remembers her firm and cold rejection.
He tries to tell himself there's no way a lady who shot him down that hard would ever want to see him again.
It's a classic case of the billionaire overthinker spiraling into a pit of self-doubt.
He's still puzzled by her behavior, convinced that a woman as kind as Laura wouldn't reject him without a major secret reason. He knows for a fact that she doesn't hate him as a person, which makes the harshness of her no even harder to swallow. The mystery of her heart is the only puzzle he can't solve. He speculates that she might be scared off by her lack of a dowry or her social reputation. But for a man with Ian's bank account, those things are totally trivial. He has enough wealth for both of them and doesn't give a single damn about society's nasty gossip. If she's poor, he'll just make her rich.
Ian resolves to go back to London and explain his feelings properly, hoping her high intelligence will allow her to finally see the truth.
But the fear of a second rejection is still lurking in his mind, making him feel like he's walking onto a battlefield where his heart is the only thing at stake. He fears that regardless of her warm heart, she is still someone who is incredibly faithful to her own strict principles.
He imagines himself pleading on his knees only for her to shake her head and say no again. It's the ultimate nightmare for a man who is used to getting everything he wants.
Driven by the fear that he'll never feel this way again, Ian vows not to give up until he brings her back to Whitefield Hall with him.
He plans to finish his work at lightning speed so he can return to London and win her heart for good. He is officially on a mission, and nothing, not even a total lockdown, will stop him. A few days pass, and the servants are officially weirded out by their master's condition.
Ian is often lost in thought, staring into space like a zombie, and he clearly hasn't slept in days.
The Ice King is melting into a puddle of lovesick misery, and the whole mansion is whispering about it. Even while acting like a ghost, Ian remains meticulous with his duties, finishing the pension documents for his retiring staff.
He's checking every detail even when his mind is flying back to London.
He might be a romantic mess, but he's still the most responsible boss in Yorkshire.
The household is buzzing with rumor because the butler is actually walking around with a smile.
Meanwhile, we get a peek at Ian's secret weapon. His sketchbook is filled with beautiful, detailed drawings of Laura. With the urgent work finished, Ian is finally ready to leave his territory and find his sister Margaret. Round 2 is about to begin. The Ice King is officially restless. After only a few days back at Whitefield Hall, Ian informs his head servant Ramswick that he is packing his bags for London again. This time, he is planning for a much longer stay, basically admitting that he is not coming back without a certain matchmaker by his side. Because he knows the estate can't run on love alone, Ian orders Ramswick to hire a land agent to handle the dirty work while he is away hunting for his future. He thanks his loyal staff and heads out, looking like a man on a desperate mission to fix his broken proposal. Ramswick and the rest of the staff aren't blind, they can see their master is in a massive hurry. They correctly guess that the woman in the portrait he's been staring at is the reason for his sudden obsession with the city. The servant gossip mill goes into overdrive as they celebrate the idea of their young master finally bringing home a mistress. They are already mentally preparing for a wedding, oblivious to the fact that the mistress in question already said no once. Ian makes a pit stop at Dunville Park, the estate belonging to his sister Margaret. It has been a month since he was last here, and he starts reflecting on how much his life has spiraled into chaos during his time in London. The peace is immediately shattered by the sound of his nephews being total menaces outside. Ian wanders over to investigate and finds his nephew Daniel Fairfax playing with an object that looks way too realistic to be a toy. Our billionaire goes into full protective uncle mode and sternly demands the boy hand over the prize. It turns out Ian's instincts were spot on. The kid was casually waving around a real pistol belonging to his father.
Ian marches into the main house, where his sister Margaret greets him with a big smile, completely clueless that her son was nearly in a tragic accident outside.
She's living in her own little bubble while the house is basically an armory. Ian doesn't even say hello before he starts scolding Margaret for her husband's insane negligence.
He points out that the gun was actually loaded with live rounds, and he is rightfully furious that the children are being raised in a shooting range.
Margaret is the queen of being unbothered, she just dismisses his concerns with a joke about punishing Daniel later. She's much more interested in her latest hobby, becoming a part-time fortune teller with a deck of cards. She pulls out a fortune card for Ian and claims it's a sign from the universe. According to her mystical deck, our grumpy billionaire is destined to be a married man before the year is over.
Ian tries to play it cool and denies having anyone special on his mind, but Margaret is 10 steps ahead of him.
She reveals that William Fairfax has been writing her detailed letters about Ian's suspiciously active social life in London. She starts listing off all the parties and picnics Ian attended, which is hilarious because everyone knows Ian usually hates people. His sudden interest in social gatherings was a massive red flag that he was hunting for a wife. Margaret finally drops the name we've all been waiting for, Miss Pendleton. She's heard through the grapevine that this specific lady was the host of every single gathering Ian frequented, and she wants the full tea immediately. Seeing Ian's visible reaction to the name, Margaret becomes 100% convinced that her brother's heart has been stolen. She starts prying for details, asking if Laura is actually as beautiful and brilliant as the rumors suggest. The conversation gets incredibly awkward when Margaret notices Ian's face turning sour.
She realizes that her powerful, wealthy brother is actually suffering from the one thing money can't fix: unrequited love.
Margaret Fairfax isn't just a sister, she's a professional-grade teaser who knows exactly which buttons to push. She laughs at Ian's worn-out face, correctly guessing that his rough appearance is the result of getting his heart stomped on by a certain London lady. When Ian tries to hide behind the threat of social suicide works perfectly. Ian finally folds and admits that his love is a pathetic one-sided mess. He agrees to let Margaret mock him as much as she wants, as long as his tear-smudged childhood poetry stays locked in her desk.
Now that the truth is out, Margaret shifts into strategist mode.
She asks if Laura actually hates him or if there is a hidden reason for the rejection. Ian is convinced that Laura likes him as a person, which is all the ammo Margaret needs to build a battle plan. Margaret advises her brother to pull a total 180 on his personality. She tells him to stop being the desperate suitor and start acting like a harmless, easygoing friend to trick Laura into lowering her social shields. The strategy gets even more manipulative as Margaret tells Ian to distance himself and start mingling with other ladies. The goal is to make Laura believe she is no longer the queen of his world, creating a psychological vacuum. She calls her masterwork the theater of imagination.
Margaret believes that the moment Laura thinks Ian is moving on to someone else, her dormant jealousy will explode like a volcano, forcing her to confront her true feelings.
This elaborate scheme is designed to turn the tables so completely that Laura becomes the lovesick one, pining for the very man she just kicked to the curb. Margaret is essentially treating Ian's love life like a high-stakes chess match.
Ian isn't exactly thrilled about playing mind games with the woman he loves.
He finds her schemes to be unhelpful and manipulative, choosing to abruptly end the visit before his sister can suggest any more. As Ian marches out, Margaret doesn't seem bothered by his grumpiness. She consults her fortune cards and gets a winning combination, the star and the swords. She is now 100% convinced that a mistress is heading for Whitefield Hall whether Ian likes her methods or not. Back in the social Shark Tank of London, Miss Lance is hosting a private tea for Janet Fairfax. On the outside, she is the image of perfect aristocratic grace, but on the inside, she is absolutely reeling from the news that Ian Dalton ghosted the entire city. Miss Lance is fuming that Ian left London without saying a single word to her.
She is stuck in a pit of uncertainty, wondering where she stands in his eyes, and why she was treated like a background character in his departure.
Janet Fairfax adds fuel to the fire by casually assuming her brother won't return to the city for years. She knows Ian hates the noise of London, and she's convinced he's gone back to his hermit lord lifestyle for the long haul. Miss Lance refuses to accept a future without the billionaire lord. She holds on to the hope that he'll return soon, but she's frustrated that they aren't close enough for her to actually send him a direct letter without looking desperate. When William Fairfax shows up for dinner, Miss Lance sees her golden opportunity.
She resolves to glue herself to the Fairfax siblings, using their friendship as a spy network to keep tabs on Ian's movements and subtly remind him that she exists.
She successfully maneuvers her way into their inner circle, inviting Janet to a symphony performance to lock in their connection. But while she's playing social chess, a real crisis is hitting the Pendleton estate. Laura is sorting through the mail and finds a letter from her nightmare uncle, Gerald, that fills her with instant dread. Just when our matchmaker was starting to settle her own heart, a shadow from the past comes knocking at her door in the form of a cold, blunt letter. Laura Pendleton is staring at a message from her uncle Gerald, the very man who turned her childhood into a nightmare. This isn't a family check-in, it's a direct order sent straight to her instead of her grandmother, and the dread is already setting in. The letter is exactly how Laura remembers the man, stiff, straightforward, and completely drained of any human warmth or basic courtesy. Uncle Gerald doesn't do greetings, he only does demands.
As she reads his icy words, the ghost of the terrified girl she used to be begins to stir in the back of her mind.
Uncle Gerald drops the big news. While over in America, he and his son Charles reconnected with an old college buddy named Tom Price. It turns out this little reunion was quite profitable because Charles managed to secure an engagement with Price's goddaughter. The lady in question is Joanne Jensen, a massive heiress from New York who is about to bring a serious influx of cash into the Pendleton family tree. Gerald mentions that Mr. Price has already landed in London for his sister's silver wedding anniversary, making him the most talked about guest in the city. Laura immediately recognizes the name. Tom Price isn't just some guy, he's a legendary figure in American finance who has been catching the eye of every socialite in London lately. With the competence of a shark and the charm of a veteran businessman, he's a titan that society can't stop whispering about.
Though he was born British, Price spent 30 years building an empire across the ocean, marrying a beauty and raising a large, happy family.
But after losing his wife, the silver-haired mogul decided it was time to return to his homeland, sparking a frenzy among the social elite. The rumor mill is working overtime, with everyone convinced that Price is on a prowl through London's ballrooms to find a second wife to fill the empty seat beside him. Why else would a man of his stature be attending every single picnic and party on the calendar? Gerald's main point finally hits the paper. He commands Laura to treat Mr. Price with the absolute utmost hospitality until the rest of the Pendleton family arrives. He's using Laura as a social concierge for his wealthy friend, treating her like a servant in her own house.
Laura tries to fight off the panic, reminding herself that she is no longer that helpless 7-year-old who used to crouch in the corners to hide from her uncle's temper.
She's a grown woman now, but she'd be a liar if she said the thought of facing him again didn't make her skin crawl.
While she might be able to handle the mental warfare, Laura is deathly afraid of what this hostile takeover will do to her grandmother. Lady Abigail is in such a delicate state that she might not even make it through the year. Any emotional explosion or family drama could be the final blow to her health. Laura breaks the news to her grandmother, expecting a refusal. But to her total shock, Lady Abigail orders her to prepare the absolute finest guest rooms and send out a formal invitation to Mr. Price immediately. The grandmother admits that she knows exactly how much Gerald tormented Laura in the past, but she asks for one last favor. She begs Laura to endure his presence for just a few days, acting as a buffer between the family's past and their future. Out of pure love for the woman who saved her, Laura swallows her pride and agrees to the request. She pushes aside her own trauma to ensure her grandmother stays at peace, even if it means opening the doors to her greatest enemy. The household turns into a construction zone as Laura takes charge, ordering the staff to repair the roof, replace old furniture, and prep the mid-sized rooms for the arriving guests. She is working herself to the bone to make the Pendleton mansion look like a fortress of perfection.
The truth behind Abigail's desperation finally comes out. She knows she doesn't have many days left to live.
Before she takes her final breath, she desperately wants to make peace with her son and see the family united one last time. Laura looks at the woman who became a mother to her when she was practically an orphan and makes a silent vow.
She will show Uncle Gerald exactly how wonderfully and elegantly her grandmother raised her.
She will face him with pride, even if it kills her.
She obsesses over the details, wondering if a perfect house and a perfect facade will be enough to hide the cracks in her soul.
She is fighting for a happy life as a lady, a life her grandmother sacrificed everything to give her.
But as the cleaning finishes and the guests draw near, Laura lets the mask slip for just a second. She admits a heartbreaking secret to herself. Despite all the luxury and the Pendleton name, she has never felt a single moment of true happiness within these beautiful, suffocating walls. Deep in a corner of her heart, Laura Pendleton keeps a fading reel of her childhood memories. She remembers her father, a wandering painter who treated the whole world like his canvas, taking her from one quiet forest to the next. Most people would be bitter about being left behind, but Laura doesn't hold a single grudge. She understands that for a man living as a drifter, raising a young daughter was a mission impossible. Still, whenever life in high society gets too heavy, she can't stop herself from imagining a different reality, one where she stayed by his side instead of being polished into a diamond by the elite. She knows she wouldn't have this top-tier education or live in a mansion. But in her dreams, that simpler, freer life looks a lot happier than the one where she has to measure every word she speaks. It's the classic battle between luxury and freedom. Currently, Laura's entire world is built on one thing: repaying her grandmother's massive debt of love. Lady Abigail sacrificed everything, even her relationship with her own son, just to keep Laura by her side. Laura is determined to be the perfect lady just to make the old woman proud. For years, she has forced herself into a mold, but the cracks are starting to show. She often feels like society only treats her as half a person, or maybe even just a decoration.
She has mastered the scary art of maintaining a perfect smile even while facing people who treat her like garbage.
Laura is playing a long game that most would find dark. She looks at her grandmother's eventual passing not with malice, but as her retirement day. She believes that once Miss Pendleton is gone, the real Laura can finally step out from the shadows and actually live for herself. But for now, her mission is to be the ultimate caretaker. She is pouring all her energy into her grandmother's final days, desperately hoping to fix the broken bond between the old lady and her estranged son before it's too late. Fast forward to a few days later, and the Pendleton house is buzzing with a formal dinner. Laura warmly welcomes Jane Hyde, who is officially our favorite career woman. Jane has ditched the search for a husband and started a new life as a typist, proving that independence is the new black. Laura introduces her friend to the star guest, Mr. Tom Price. He's the billionaire from America who's been camping out at their house because Uncle Gerald said so. Price is a man who definitely doesn't understand the concept of an indoor voice. Mr. Price is immediately fascinated by Jane. He's intrigued by her practical fashion and the fact that she's actually out there earning a paycheck. He notes that in the US, women are joining the workforce in droves, and he seems to love the change. When Jane reveals she only started working to avoid the trap of marriage, the room expects a scandal. Instead, Price shocks everyone by calling her choice impressive.
He's the first noble adjacent guy to actually cheer for a woman's freedom.
Price then drops a verbal nuke on the institution of marriage. He boldly claims that a husband is usually just a heavy burden for any woman to carry. He even jokes that his late wife was probably doing a victory dance the moment she got rid of him. Even though he's loud and constantly breaks all the fancy social rules, Price is actually a world-class entertainer. He keeps the guests glued to their seats with wild stories about the chaos of New York, making the stuffy London atmosphere feel alive for once. After the party, Laura is running on empty.
Constant hosting is a literal drain on her soul, but she feels a sense of professional relief.
The dinners are going so well that Uncle Gerald has zero ammo to complain about her management skills. We reach the fifth dinner, and the vibe gets uncomfortably intimate. Most of the guests leave early, leaving Laura alone in the parlor playing the piano for Mr. Price at his request. The air in the room suddenly feels way too thin. Laura's internal alarm starts blaring when Price moves way closer than a guest should. He starts pouring on the syrup, claiming that Uncle Gerald has been bragging for years about how beautiful and proper Laura is. It sounds like a normal compliment, but Laura isn't buying it. She immediately smells a rat. She remembers the cold reality that her uncle hasn't actually laid eyes on her since she was a 10-year-old kid. If Gerald is boasting about her adult looks, he's lying through his teeth, which means Mr. Price is playing a very different game than she expected.
A sudden crash in the parlor sends a servant running in panic, but Laura keeps her cool and kicks everyone out to deal with the persistent billionaire guest in total privacy.
Tom Price finally drops the act and admits he has a massive obsession with the grace of English ladies, hoping to find a new wife to replace his late spouse during this trip. The American finance mogul officially drops to one knee and asks her to pack her bags for New York, promising a fresh start that she never actually asked for. He tells her that being nearly 30 is actually a great feature because he is looking for a wise companion to warm his bed rather than some clueless 20-year-old girl.
Laura doesn't even blink before hitting him with a cold rejection, making it crystal clear that she has zero feelings and her heart will never change for him.
Most men would take the hint and leave, but Price decides to turn into a full-time florist, flooding the Pendleton estate with daily bouquets that she refuses to even touch. He starts acting like a high-society detective, tracking her every move and showing up at every concert and ball just to breathe the same air as the matchmaker. The pressure gets so insane that our favorite lady matchmaker officially retires from social life, locking herself away just to escape the billionaire stalker. Instead of helping, the London elite start calling her a fool for turning down a gold mine, whispering that she is far too old to be this picky about a husband. Gossips argue that she should have used Price to save her own future instead of playing Cupid for everyone else, mocking her for being single and penniless. Mothers across the city start using Laura as a horror story to scare their daughters into getting married early, making her the official face of social failure.
Over at the Fairfax estate, Miss Lance is losing her mind over the humiliation, calling it a total insult that an earl's granddaughter is being linked to a guy 24 years older.
She rants about how Gerald Pendleton is a cheapskate who didn't give Laura a dowry, which would have let her marry a respectable guy from her own generation.
William Fairfax finally stops the trash talk and defends Laura, telling everyone to mind their own business because she is more than capable of handling her own battles.
Alone in his study, William struggles with how to tell Ian Dalton the bad news about the persistent old suitor currently chasing the woman he loves. Before he can finish his letter, an urgent message from his sister-in-law Margaret arrives, scolding him for hiding Ian's romantic drama from the family. Realizing he was the only one out of the loop, William throws away his draft and sends an express mail to Whitefield Hall to warn the Ice King about his rival.
The letter finally reaches the northern estate, leaving Ian Dalton staring at the paper while he realizes his peaceful time in the countryside is officially over.
Ian Dalton makes a frantic and completely unannounced return to London, catching the entire household off guard with his hurried arrival. He ignores all pleasantries, ordering his luggage up to the guest room while immediately dragging William into the study for an urgent private showdown. William is left in a state of total bewilderment, questioning why on earth Ian would abandon his massive estate to a random stand-in just to sprint back to the city like a man possessed. It is a high society mystery that even the servants are struggling to comprehend as they watch their master act like a lovesick ghost. The true motivation behind this madness is revealed when Ian drops his billionaire cool and sharply demands the name of the American banker currently pursuing Laura. The Ice King is radiating pure, unfiltered jealousy, and it is clear he did not come back for a simple social visit.
Consumed by a protective and jealous rage, Ian declares his ultimate intention to drive the American man out of Britain for good.
He wants to ensure this interloper never even dreams of returning to bother Laura again, showing a side of himself that is far from the usual composed lord.
William is absolutely horrified to realize that Ian is actually considering a duel, reminding his friend that such barbaric traditions ended with their grandfather's generation. He thinks Ian has officially lost his mind to a crime of passion.
Ian coldly maintains that the law still permits duels as long as there are witnesses present. He is fully prepared to use a firearm to settle the score, showing he is willing to risk a prison sentence just to defend a woman who technically dumped him. William tries to knock some sense into him, arguing that challenging an older man like Mr. Price is not an honorable duel, but rather a case of legal elder abuse. He pleads with Ian to stop the insanity before he ruins his entire reputation in London. Ian finally drops his guard and confesses the staggering depth of his feelings, admitting he has loved Laura since the very first time their eyes met. He admits she has been in his heart this entire time, fueling his sudden and reckless return. The master plan is revealed. Ian originally intended to marry her in London and bring her back to Whitefield Hall to be the mistress of his estate. He had visualized his entire future with her before ever asking for her hand. When pressed by William, Ian is forced to admit the painful reality: Laura is already fully aware of his feelings and she decisively rejected his proposal. The rejection is clearly the source of his current spiral into aggression. William points out the sheer madness of Ian's plan, noting that attacking a guest of Laura's uncle right after a rejection looks like a crime of passion blinded by jealousy. He warns Ian that he is being completely irrational and dangerous. Ian argues that if Laura had a father or a brother to stand by her, they would have gladly drawn their pistols to defend her honor from such a senile geezer. He feels it is his duty to step in since her actual relatives are failing her. William warns him that if he proceeds with this violent scheme, Laura will be placed in a humiliating position and will likely never agree to see his face again. He makes it clear that the gun is the fastest way to lose her forever.
After urging Ian to calm down and think rationally, William privately reflects on the situation. He realizes that despite Ian's current meltdown, the Lord and the Matchmaker would actually make a very well-matched and powerful couple. William thinks Ian would make a fine husband, and that Laura is strong enough to handle his intense temperament.
He is genuinely shocked that such a perfect match was ruined by Ian's clumsy attempt at romance. Upon hearing the details of how Ian expressed his feelings, William is stunned by his friend's complete lack of social tact. He advises that rebuilding their friendship from the ground up is now the only way Ian will ever have a shot at winning her heart.
He reminds Ian that Laura is a strong, independent woman who has successfully managed scoundrels and unwanted suitors on her own for 6 years. She does not need a billionaire savior as much as Ian thinks she does.
William argues that interfering now will only damage Ian's relationship with Laura beyond repair. He insists that the moment Ian causes a public scene with Mr. Price, any slim chance of reconciliation will be gone forever.
Ian finally admits to himself that William is right, realizing that letting his rage take over would be the ultimate mistake.
He is left going insane with frustration, wishing he could just beat the bastard senseless and kick him out of the country.
As Ian wonders how to naturally let Laura know he is back in London without sounding desperate, he is interrupted by the news of a new arrival.
He is left in a state of pure confusion when he is told a visitor is already insisting on seeing him immediately. The mystery visitor is none other than Miss Lance, the very woman Ian has spent weeks trying to ignore. Ian is left staring in total bafflement, trying to remember who she even is while she forces her way into his already chaotic London return. Janet interrupts Ian's moody silence to announce a surprise visitor, but Ian is initially baffled by the name Miss Dora Lance. He only manages to place her after remembering she is the lady Laura introduced to him during the social season in London. The billionaire primarily recalls Dora as having a bizarrely whiny face and tries to avoid the visit by claiming he is too tired. However, Janet reveals she has already informed the guest that he is home, leaving him with no polite way to escape. Ian stops himself from turning her away when he remembers how pleased Laura seemed when he previously showed interest in her friends. He decides to endure the social call as a strategic move to maintain a connection to Laura's world. Dora makes an energetic entrance, expressing her absolute shock at his sudden and unannounced disappearance from the city. Ian offers a deeply polite apology while secretly forcing himself to tolerate her presence for the sake of his mission. Dora offers her condolences regarding the death of the parish reverend, but Ian quickly finds her excessive chatter to be quite draining.
He realizes that this social interaction is going to be a serious test of his mental patience.
The socialite asks about his time back at Whitefield, but Ian struggles to stay engaged with her endless questions.
He feels his ears starting to throb from the volume of her talk and wonders if she simply enjoys hearing her own voice.
Ian begins to reach his absolute mental limit with the forced pleasantries, wishing he could just hole up in his room and mope in peace. He notes that Dora giggles at literally everything he says, which only adds to his growing irritation. He admits that he finds high society talk of ball seasons and rowing races to be utterly boring. He would much rather be back on his own territory, but he continues to play the role of the attentive host for Laura's sake. Ian confesses his preference for a quiet life of reading and horseback riding over the noisy social events of the city. This leads Janet to enthusiastically reveal the secret of his incredible talent for drawing to their impressed guest. Janet claims that Ian's drawings are far better than those of any professional art teacher she has ever worked with. Dora is instantly captivated by this news and begs for a chance to see his private sketchbook, prompting a reluctant Ian to agree. Ian hands over his sketchbook after being double-teamed by the enthusiasm of both his sister and Dora. When the ladies see the sketches, they are completely stunned by his flawless skills and his ability to capture detail with a sharp eye. Dora is so moved by the quality of his art that she immediately asks Ian to draw her portrait right then and there. She praises his delicate touch, but Ian is wary of the social consequences of engaging in such an intimate task. He initially refuses the request, explaining that drawing an unmarried debutante alone in a private setting could ruin her reputation. He tries to use the excuse of gentlemanly honor to avoid a task he finds quite tedious. To solve the problem, Dora and Janet propose that he draw both of them together to keep the situation proper. Ian views this as the necessary price to pay for maintaining his strategic link to Laura, so he finally picks up his pencil. As he works with a delicate and precise touch, Dora is completely swept away by the romantic atmosphere. She feels as though his intense gaze while he observes her is a personal touch, and she falls deeper into her own fantasies. Dora treats the finished portrait like a priceless relic, placing it in her finest frame.
She hangs it in the most visible spot in her parlor to maintain the happy illusion that she is seeing Ian Dalton every single day.
The scene shifts to the Pendleton residence the next morning, where the maid spots a familiar figure loitering outside.
She realizes it is the Lord himself and decides to abandon her bedding chores to rush out and meet him.
And tells Ian how romantic it is for him to wait outside his love's house, while inside, Laura is left completely baffled.
She wonders where her maid disappeared to so suddenly as the mysterious morning drama continues to unfold.
Ian Dalton tracks down the maid and to get the real tea on Laura's health and the annoying American billionaire who has been camping out at her front door lately. He desperately tries to find out where Mr. Price is staying, but Anne hits him with a firm refusal because she knows that dangerous look in his eyes means trouble is coming.
Anne gives him a necessary reality check, warning the young lord that their mistress can never become the wife of a cold-blooded murderer.
When Ian asks about his actual prospects with Laura, and admits there is still a spark of hope as long as he keeps his pistols in their holsters and his honor intact, the maid drops a bombshell, revealing that the situation is far more dire because Charles Pendleton was the one who personally scouted Mr. Price for his niece.
If Laura dares to say no to this American mogul, she is looking at a future filled with physical threats from her uncle or a one-way ticket to a lonely exile.
Ian promises he can offer her all the protection she needs, but Ian wonders if our independent matchmaker is the type to let herself be rescued like a damsel.
Then comes the biggest secret of all, and reveals that Laura has been secretly preparing for years to survive on her own as a professional governess. Ian is left in total disbelief that a noblewoman would choose to be a servant, but and explains it is the only way Laura can see a free future for herself. Our girl is actually a linguistic genius, mastering 5 different languages including the ancient classics like Latin and Greek to secure her own independence.
This news hits Ian like a freight train because he realizes Laura's fierce independence means she might eventually move to a place where he can never reach her again.
Ian knows he has to find a way to win her over before she no longer needs him, so he makes a quick exit while telling and to keep his visit a total secret. And sneaks back into the house and covers her tracks with a lie about visiting the general store to check on a candlestick order she was waiting for. She further explains that the repairman for the stairs was sick, successfully hiding the fact that she was actually holding a secret meeting with the Ice King outside. As she watches her mistress go about her work, and can't forget the dangerous and intense resolve she saw burning in the young lord's eyes earlier that morning. She is absolutely convinced that a man with that much determination will not stop until he has successfully made Laura the next Lady Dalton of Whitefield. Across the city, news of Ian's return to London spreads like a wildfire because of the beautiful portrait he gifted to the Lance family. At a high society tea party, Dora Lance's friends are busy misreading Ian's every agreement as a sign that he is secretly and deeply in love with her. The ladies are already picking out bridesmaid dresses for a grand wedding, fantasizing about the extreme privacy and mystery of the legendary Whitefield Hall. Dora is lost in her own romantic delusion, believing that Ian's goal for returning to the city is to finally claim her as his bride. One socialite reveals a shocking secret: a rare painting of the secret Dalton estate actually exists, but it isn't in a museum or a royal gallery. London's high society is currently on fire with a juicy new rumor. Word on the street is that the Pendleton townhouse has a rare landscape painting of Whitefield Hall hanging right in their drawing room. For a place that is usually strictly private, seeing it on a canvas in someone else's house is basically a social earthquake. The gossip squad is convinced that Ian Dalton and the Pendletons must be practically family.
Everyone is wondering if the reclusive billionaire painted the scene specifically as a gift for them, sparking endless speculation about just how deep their connection really goes.
Miss Dora Lance is feeling a sharp sting of jealousy as she listens to her friends suggest that Laura might have sweet-talked Ian into giving her such a private gift. The idea of Laura having something so unique is driving her crazy, especially since she wants to be the center of Ian's world.
To save Dora's bruised ego, her friends remind her that she possesses a personal portrait painted by Ian.
They argue that a personal likeness is a much deeper sign of affection than a simple landscape, successfully talking her back into her delusional romantic fantasy. The long-awaited day finally arrives as a dusty carriage pulls up to the Pendleton townhouse.
Gerald Pendleton and his entire entourage have officially reached London, bringing a cloud of tension and old memories with them.
Watching from the safety of the shadows, Laura catches sight of her cousin Charles. She is immediately struck by how much he looks like a younger version of Gerald, harsh, arrogant, and possessing the same cold eyes that used to haunt her childhood. Then comes the star of the show, Joanne Jensen. The American heiress radiates a striking presence and a level of confidence that perfectly matches her reputation as one of the wealthiest women in New York. She carries herself like she already owns the city. Laura takes a deep, steadying breath and steels her resolve.
She reminds herself that the frightened 7-year-old girl is gone, and that this townhouse is her territory now.
She is ready to face her demons with her head held high. Stepping forward with the grace of a seasoned professional, Laura welcomes the group. She explains that she is acting as the official host on behalf of Lady Abigail, maintaining the perfect image of a refined lady while her heart is pounding. Joanne Jensen immediately proves she is not interested in stuffy British rules by introducing herself without waiting for an invitation. She expresses an eager desire to see the interior of the house, having heard it is the most elegant residence in all of London. When Laura offers a tour, Joanne is specifically focused on finding the drawing room. However, Charles tries to play the controlling fiancé, attempting to steer her toward a meeting with her godfather, Mr. Price, instead. A very tense and very public argument breaks out between the engaged couple right in the middle of the foyer. Joanne openly mocks Charles for his fake concern over her health, making it clear she isn't the type to be pushed around by a Pendleton man. Charles tries to flex his muscles by claiming that English tradition requires a fiancée to obey her future husband's every command. He is trying to humiliate her into submission, but he has chosen the wrong woman for that game. Joanne turns to Laura for a fact check, and Laura doesn't hesitate to throw her cousin under the bus. She coolly denies that any such restrictive tradition exists, effectively stripping Charles of his authority in front of the entire household. Laura watches the fallout with a keen eye, realizing there is a strange new hierarchy at play. The Pendleton men are forced to bite their tongues and indulge Joanne's every whim simply because her American conglomerate wealth is far more powerful than their noble name. After Gerald finally manages to convince Joanne to take a rest until the formal dinner, Laura gets to work. She directs the men to their prepared guest rooms on the 3rd floor, keeping her interactions as brief and professional as possible. Determined to make the evening perfect and avoid any drama, Laura focuses on the dinner logistics. Her primary goal is to carefully arrange the first meeting between her grandmother and her uncle to ensure everything remains peaceful.
Her carefully constructed plans are suddenly nuked when a panicked servant reveals the truth.
Gerald and Charles didn't go to their rooms at all. Instead, they went straight to Lady Abigail's private quarters to pay their respects. Laura is hit with a wave of immediate alarm as she rushes toward her grandmother's room.
The confrontation she feared the most is happening right now, far sooner than she expected, and she knows the fragile piece of the house is about to shatter.
Deeply concerned that the emotional stress will cause her grandmother's health to collapse, Laura rushes toward the bedroom. She is determined to act as a mediator and prevent a medical disaster before it's too late. Upon bursting into the room, Laura is stunned into silence by a scene of total humility.
The once harsh and arrogant Gerald is kneeling before his mother's bed, tearfully begging for her forgiveness in a display of raw emotion she never thought possible.
Lady Abigail reaches out with warmth and accepts his apology, signaling that the long-standing family rift has finally come to an end. It is an unexpected moment of grace that seems to wash away decades of resentment in an instant. Although the reconciliation appears beautiful on the surface, Laura finds the sudden shift in atmosphere incredibly strange.
To her, the warmth feels artificial and performative, reminding her of an overly dramatic soap opera where the actors are trying too hard.
Following his mother's lead, Gerald finally acknowledges Laura's presence in the room. He offers a stiff and formal word of thanks for her years of dedicated care for Lady Abigail, though his eyes remain as cold as ever. That evening, the Pendleton house hosts a grand formal dinner that appears to be a perfect family gathering.
The air is filled with lively conversation and a forced sense of warmth as the guests enjoy the high-quality meal.
The main topic of conversation during the banquet centers on the engaged couple. Charles explains his transition from a high-status law career to a humble spiritual path, painting himself as a man of great sacrifice. Charles delivers a pious speech about enduring poverty and hardship through faith, receiving nods of agreement from everyone. Laura, however, finds his words deeply contradictory and insulting given his crude and arrogant behavior earlier that day. Despite her deep misgivings about her cousin's true character, Laura remains silent to protect the dinner's harmony. She shifts her focus to managing the household logistics and delivery schedules for the following morning. Her quiet moment of duty is interrupted by Mr. Price, who uses the clumsy excuse of forgotten gloves to corner her alone in the hallway. Laura is immediately on guard, sensing his intentions are far from innocent. Mr. Price asks Laura for a significant favor, requesting that she mentor Joanne Jensen in the nuances of British etiquette. He wants Laura to help the American heiress conquer London society and find her place among the elite. Seeing it as a duty to her cousin's fiancé, Laura reluctantly agrees to help Joanne navigate the complex social world of the ton. She accepts the responsibility, even though she finds the request tiring. The conversation takes a sharp turn for the worse when Mr. Price attempts to flirt and propose marriage once again. Laura loses her patience and issues a sharp, final rejection, telling him clearly that her answer will never change. To Laura's utter frustration, Price dismisses her firm refusal as if it were a playful riddle. He arrogantly claims that finding the true meaning behind a lady's words is a difficult task, refusing to take her no for an answer. Exhausted and nursing a growing headache from the day's emotional and social strain, Laura attempts to retreat upstairs for rest. She feels drained by the weight of keeping up appearances for her grandmother's sake. Uncle Gerald finally drops the act of the grieving son and confronts Laura with a face full of cold indifference. He mocks her for being the household mistress for 12 years yet remaining single, questioning her value in the aristocratic marriage market with a sharp, judgmental tone. The conversation gets even nastier as Gerald delivers a brutal warning. He tells Laura that she should expect absolutely zero inheritance from her grandmother and sneers at the idea that any suitable match would ever want her at this stage. Gerald makes his ultimate move by ordering Laura to find a way to support herself immediately.
He makes it crystal clear that her time living under the Pendleton roof is coming to an end, effectively evicting her from the only home she has known for a decade.
Laura stands there taking the verbal abuse, realizing that her uncle's heart is still a fortress of hate. He doesn't see a niece, he sees a nuisance that needs to be cleared out to make room for his own profitable future. As she walks away, Laura's internal monologue is a mix of pain and fire.
She realizes that in her uncle's eyes, she is nothing more than a filthy rat and a parasitic freeloader who has stayed at the party far too long.
Hidden from view, Laura makes a silent and powerful vow. The day she finally earns her freedom, she will gladly throw away the Pendleton name that her uncle holds so dearly, cutting every tie to the toxic family tree. The next morning brings a complete shift in vibe as Joanne Jensen makes a surprise, unannounced appearance at the townhouse. The American heiress is practically glowing with excitement as she tours the estate, already acting like she belongs there. Joanne is clearly captivated by the sheer prestige of Grosvenor Street.
She notes that this neighborhood is a fortress of status where only the right bloodlines are usually allowed to settle, and she is eager to be part of the club.
Despite the fact that she's being kicked out, Laura maintains her professional mask and remains the perfect hostess. She patiently answers every one of Joanne's endless questions about the house's history and its expensive furnishings. Joanne doesn't hold back her ambitions, boldly declaring that her goal is to dominate London society the second her marriage to Charles is official. She sees the city as her next playground and she's ready to play for keeps. Then comes the massive plot twist that leaves Laura reeling.
Joanne reveals that Charles specifically offered her the Grosvenor Street townhouse as a wedding gift instead of a quiet life at a vicarage.
Laura realizes her home has been traded away behind her back.
Even though Joanne is celebrating her future home right in front of the woman she is displacing, Laura can see there is no actual malice in the girl. Joanne is just genuinely excited, unaware that her happiness is built on Laura's total loss. Joanne switches gears and admits she has a major wardrobe crisis. She lost 2 of her 3 trunks during the voyage from America and is currently stuck with only a few day dresses and a single ball gown. Since every elite dressmaker is booked solid for the social season, Laura suggests a modern solution: Harrods department store. She offers to help Joanne pick out some high-quality, fashionable ready-to-wear pieces to save her social reputation. Joanne is deeply grateful, admitting that joining a British noble family is the one thing her massive American wealth could never buy on its own. She reveals her plan to use the Pendleton name as a launchpad to eventually conquer high society across all of Europe. Laura finds Joanne's blunt honesty to be a breath of fresh air. She compares the heiress to a bold pirate who is far more sincere and refreshing than the usual hypocritical socialites she has to deal with in London. Laura officially agrees to mentor Joanne in the complex nuances of British etiquette. She plans to introduce the girl to her inner circle at the upcoming Cambridge vs. Oxford rowing match, turning the outsider into a social force. A week later, the 2 women arrive at the rowing match, and the reaction is immediate. Joanne's stunning transformation and her new, confident aura capture the attention of the entire crowd, signaling that the conquest. Laura quickly masks her surprise with practiced politeness, taking the opportunity to introduce Joanne Jensen to the gathered socialites to divert attention from her internal chaos. The gathered group expresses great interest in meeting Joanne, noting that the entire city has been burning with curiosity about the arrival of the wealthy American heiress. In a remarkably short amount of time, Joanne proves she has mastered the complex nuances of British etiquette, deeply impressing the ladies with her refined behavior and grace. Her successful display of aristocratic poise earns her an immediate and coveted invitation to an upcoming ball at the prestigious Lance estate. Laura observes that by gaining the favor of Miss Lance, the most influential debutante in London, Joanne has effectively secured her social standing among the elite.
Despite the triumph of her protégé, Laura remains internally distracted by Ian's sudden return, wondering why he has abandoned his estate in Whitefield so soon.
Nearby gossips begin to speculate loudly about Ian's intentions, questioning if he has finally returned to London to act as a suitor for the beautiful Miss Lance. These rumors are further fueled by the news of a private painting Ian created for the Lance and Fairfax families, suggesting a new and scandalous level of intimacy between them. As Ian approaches their group, Laura feels a palpable shift in the atmosphere, noting that he seems far more distant and composed than during their last meeting. Laura formally introduces Ian to Joanne, carefully explaining the complex family connections and the link to her uncle's friend, Mr. Price. Ian politely asks to join the group as they move to a more comfortable location, but Laura is struck by his apparent lack of any personal or romantic interest in her.
She begins to painfully second-guess her previous memories, wondering if she had completely misread the deep romantic feelings she once thought he held for her.
Laura considers the heartbreaking possibility that Ian's persistent visits in the past were not signs of affection, but rather simple attempts to clear up her misunderstandings.
Feeling physically drained and overwhelmed by these conflicting thoughts, Laura tells the group she is unwell and needs to find a drink alone to escape the pressure. While away from the crowd, she tries to steady her heart, reminding herself of her earlier resolution to let him go and avoid the torture of hopeless longing.
Ian follows her and approaches her again in private, and Laura notices with worry that he appears much thinner and more worn than when they last met. After returning an item to her and ensuring their conversation remains discreet, Ian asks Laura if he might trouble her for a moment of her time to ask a very specific and important question.
Laura finds herself alone with Ian Dalton, her mind racing with questions about what he could possibly want to ask her after their long time apart. She agrees to walk with him, but the tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife as she wonders about his true intentions.
Ian starts by checking if she has been well, and Laura politely confirms. Underneath his calm exterior, the Ice King is actually a bundle of nerves just to be in her presence again, silently calling out her name as he looks at her with hidden intensity. As they walk together, Ian is secretly overwhelmed with a flood of emotion.
He admits to himself that he has missed Laura every single day they were separated, and being beside her now feels almost unbelievable after months of lonely longing.
He struggles to keep his intense gaze away from her, fearing that if he shows too much passion, she might be spooked and run away again.
He explains that his time back at Whitefield Hall was unpleasant and filled with nothing but mountains of overdue work.
He confesses that he returned to London because his beloved estate felt unbearably lonely without company.
The silence of the countryside has lost its comfort, and he feels a deep change within himself since his first meeting with the matchmaker.
Ian admits that he has been thinking deeply about Laura's previous words regarding soulmates and a harmonious life between a man and a woman. Her unique perspective on love has clearly left a permanent mark on his mind and changed his outlook. He tells Laura that being with her made him realize he truly needs a wife to serve as the mistress of Whitefield.
To Laura's total surprise, he asks for her help to make him more attractive to women, claiming his personality is too blunt and peculiar. Ian expresses his urgent desire to be married within the year, leaving Laura in a state of absolute confusion.
She starts to wonder if she completely misunderstood his previous feelings for her, questioning if he is deceiving himself or if she was simply wrong about his heart.
Determined to respond with the grace of a professional, Laura promises to help him in any way she can to find a suitable match. She pushes her own heartache aside to keep the promise she made to his family and maintain their friendship. She suggests that he use the upcoming ball hosted by Miss Lance as an opportunity to find a potential bride. Ian reveals there is already one lady he is interested in, though he admits he lacks the confidence to approach her properly yet.
Laura encourages him to ask this mystery lady to dance and reminds him of the waltz steps she once taught him.
She is relieved that his thoughts on marriage have changed positively, even if it means he will marry someone else.
She explains that a dance is a deeply intimate moment where two people fall into rhythm together, much like a marriage. Ian tells Laura he would never tire of learning from her and asks if she will teach him another dance one day. Laura convinces herself that Ian only views her as a dear friend, trying her best not to misunderstand his kindness. She tells herself that he is only treating her as a companion, which is exactly what she expected after her earlier rejection. She officially marks him as the first gentleman on her dance card, labeling him strictly as her best friend to protect her own heart. She believes they are a perfect match as allies and hopes he will soon find the right partner. Laura hopes he will begin the new life he has always wanted, securing the happiest ending for everyone involved.
However, returning home brings a new fear as she notes that her grandmother's breathing has become increasingly rough and labored.
While recounting the details of the regatta to Lady Abigail, the elderly woman looks at Laura with soft, knowing eyes.
She gently asks if Laura is struggling with the current situation, sensing the internal battle her granddaughter is fighting behind that perfect smile.
Grandmother Abigail watches Laura with a heavy heart, noticing the deep exhaustion etched into her granddaughter's face. She calls out Laura's long-standing habit of hiding every ounce of internal pain behind a stoic and perfectly polite mask, never allowing the world to see her struggle.
Laura admits the truth in a rare moment of vulnerability. She swallows her true feelings in total silence, because her only goal is to protect her grandmother's fragile peace.
She is determined to ensure Abigail's happiness during what both women realize are her final days on Earth.
Sensing that her own end is rapidly approaching, Abigail urges Laura to hold on just a little bit longer. She tells her that the finish line of this long, difficult race is finally in sight and that the burden Laura carries will soon be lifted. The elderly woman recalls the heartbroken child who cried for days after being separated from her father years ago.
She laments that the harsh world has forced Laura to become someone who can no longer even cry freely, having traded her tears for social armor. Abigail makes a cryptic promise, stating that Laura will be properly compensated for the 12 years of absolute sacrifice she has endured for the Pendleton name.
This leaves Laura internally unsettled, wondering about the true intentions hidden behind her grandmother's words.
Upon leaving the sick room, Laura's brief moment of peace is shattered by Uncle Gerald, who intercepts her in the hallway. He immediately begins a cold interrogation, questioning her behavior during the recent rowing match and her interactions with Joanne Jensen. Gerald brings up the persistent and wealthy Tom Price, demanding to know the real reason why Laura has the audacity to refuse a marriage proposal that would solve all her problems. He sees her refusal as a direct insult to his authority and his plans for the family. When Laura explains that she simply has no romantic feelings for the man, Gerald strikes a low blow. He insults her by claiming she has inherited her mother's vanity along with her beauty, implying her heart is as shallow as her birth was scandalous.
He reminds her of her precarious status as an illegitimate child with absolutely no dowry to her name.
He tells her point blank that a penniless outsider is in no position to be picky about her future husband and should be grateful for any offer at all. Laura refuses to be intimidated and stands her ground with icy dignity. She asserts that regardless of her status, a lady has every fundamental right to have her personal decisions regarding marriage respected by her family. Gerald dismisses her talk of principles as nothing more than a shallow ploy to raise her social value in the eyes of the ton. He arrogantly orders her to stop the games and eventually accept the proposal after a brief, face-saving wait.
Despite the crushing pressure from the head of the household, Laura remains firm in her secret conviction.
She vows to herself that she will never sell her soul for money or compromise her heart for the sake of a family that views her as a parasite. A few days later, Laura visits the home of Lady Nigely and finds Joanne Jensen in a state of complete social despair. The American heiress is terrified she will become the laughingstock of London because the flashy gowns she brought from New York are far too gaudy for the city's elite. With the social season at its peak and no professional dressmakers available on such short notice, Joanne's debut seems doomed. That is, until Laura steps in to perform a social miracle using nothing but her own refined taste and steady hands. During the visit, Laura meets Lady Nigely properly and discovers a shocking family connection. The woman is actually the younger sister of her persistent stalker, Mr. Tom Price. The web around Laura seems to be tightening with every social call. Laura transforms the American dress by stripping away the over-the-top decorations and tailoring the fit to create an aura of quiet, refined elegance. Joanne and Lady Nigely are stunned, praising Laura for making the heiress look like a true member of the British nobility. Laura is desperate to escape the house before Mr. Price arrives, but her success backfires. Cornered by the grateful women, she is pressured to stay for a formal dinner, leaving her trapped in the very lion's den she was trying to avoid. Laura finds a rare moment of peace and relaxation while being treated to a lavish meal by Mrs. Knisley and Joanne Jensen.
She truly enjoys the change of pace from her usual exhausting role as a constant hostess and feels the weight of her responsibilities lifting for a brief moment. The hospitality of the two ladies is surprisingly cheerful and pleasant, providing Laura with a comfortable time of rest for the first time in a long while.
For once, she feels like a guest who is being cared for rather than the one managing every detail of a household. The pleasant atmosphere is suddenly shattered when Mrs. Knisley asks if Laura has finally decided to accept her brother Tom's earnest marriage proposal. Laura is frozen in silent bewilderment as the woman claims she heard Laura was not completely uninterested in the match. Despite Joanne's attempts to stop her aunt from overstepping, Mrs. Knisley continues to press the issue with insensitive vigor. She suggests that Laura should marry quickly because she is at an age where she can no longer afford to be picky. Laura firmly interrupts the conversation to clarify this massive misunderstanding, stating clearly that she has already refused Mr. Price multiple times. She is shocked that her previous rejections seem to have been completely ignored or rewritten. To Laura's horror, the women dismiss her firm rejection as nothing more than feminine shyness.
They express their joy at the thought of her looking after their godfather in his later years, acting as if the wedding is already a settled fact.
Realizing that these women are firmly convinced of a wedding she never agreed to, Laura senses a dark conspiracy working behind the scenes. She understands that someone has been feeding them lies to force her into a corner. Laura declares with absolute and icy certainty that she has zero intention of marrying the man. She warns them that any further mention of the topic will be considered a personal insult to her honor and dignity. Feeling deeply insulted despite the earlier hospitality, Laura abruptly stands up and takes her leave from the table. She is so fuming that she refuses the offer of a carriage to see her home, preferring to walk rather than spend another minute in their presence. Joanne follows Laura out to speak in private, asking point-blank if Laura truly holds no romantic feelings for her godfather.
She seems to finally realize that the version of the story she was told does not match the woman standing in front of her.
Once Laura confirms her total lack of interest, Joanne reveals a shocking secret. She tells Laura that Mr. Price is planning to propose to her publicly at the grand ball the very next day, fully expecting a yes in front of all of London society. Joanne explains that the blame for this entire mess lies with Gerald Pendleton. It turns out he met with Mr. Price in America 6 months ago specifically to secure a massive investment for the family. It is revealed that Gerald falsely told Mr. Price that he had already received a favorable reply from Laura regarding a marriage match. He manufactured her consent out of thin air to close his business deal. Joanne asks Laura if she ever actually sent such a letter, making it clear that Mr. Price only pursued her because he was led to believe his feelings were mutual. The billionaire suitor was also a victim of Gerald's lies.
The ugly truth finally comes to light. Gerald Pendleton traded Laura's hand in marriage for a direct investment into his son's failing shipbuilding business.
He treated his own niece like a piece of cargo to be sold for profit. Joanne characterizes the entire situation as a cold-hearted scheme to sell Laura off to a wealthy benefactor for the sake of the family's finances. She admits it is a disgusting way to treat a relative.
Although the situation is humiliating, Joanne encourages Laura to still attend the ball.
She wants Mr. Price to have the chance to apologize for the confusion and clear his name from this scam.
Laura walks away as the pieces finally fall into place in her mind. She realizes her own uncle has been the puppeteer behind every ridiculous and painful event she has endured since his arrival in London.
Returning to the Pendleton house in a silent and deadly rage, Laura storms into her uncle's room without even knocking.
She is ready to confront the man who betrayed her and sold her future for a few ships. Before Laura can even utter a single word of accusation, Gerald looks at her with ice in his eyes. He coldly informs her that she will be attending the ball tomorrow and she will officially accept Tom Price's proposal as ordered. Laura, realizing she is trapped in a cage built by her own family. Her uncle's greed knows no bounds, and he is prepared to ruin her life just to keep his bank account full. Uncle Gerald starts the confrontation with a voice as cold as ice, issuing a final command to his niece. He tells Laura that she must attend the Lance family ball tomorrow night and publicly accept Tom Price's marriage proposal without question. Laura remains completely defiant despite his intimidating tone, asserting that her own wishes and heart were never once considered in this business arrangement. She tells him to his face that she still maintains the absolute right to refuse any match she does not desire. The tension in the room reaches a boiling point as Gerald begins to mock her beauty. He claims she grew up to be far too pretty for her own good and has inherited her late mother's haughty and arrogant nature, which he clearly despises.
He berates her for failing to know her place, reminding her with cruel precision that she is a penniless illegitimate child with nowhere else to go.
He tells her she should be on her knees thanking him for his supposed generosity instead of being ungrateful. Gerald calls her naive for holding on to her pride, but Laura counters with a sharp edge to her voice. She tells him she has never forgotten her difficult and lowly position within the family for even a single second of the last 12 years. Laura finally asks the question that has been burning in her soul, questioning if she was ever actually seen as a human being to him.
She wonders if she is simply a flawed and shameful object that must be subjugated to a man she does not love just for his profit.
Gerald's cruelty reaches a horrific new low when he confesses his darkest regret. He tells her he should have secretly sent her to a distant orphanage or simply drowned her in a ditch when she was a helpless child.
He screams that she is nothing but a filthy, walking shame to the Pendleton name, despite the fact that she has lived comfortably in silk within the family townhouse.
His rage is so intense that the walls of the study seem to shake.
Laura stands her ground and drops a bombshell of her own, revealing she knows the real truth about her parents.
She tells him they had a secret wedding ceremony and that they truly and deeply loved each other, unlike the cold deals Gerald makes. She explains the tragic reality that her mother's rapidly worsening health was the only reason their marriage was never officially registered at Gretna Green. It wasn't a lack of commitment, but a lack of time that left her in this social limbo. Laura boldly accuses her uncle of hating her father for the simplest and shallowest of reasons. She claims he didn't care about his background or character, but only hated him because he was a poor man who brought no money to the table.
She strikes a massive nerve by telling Gerald that his mind is only ever on money and investments.
She claims he only hates her mother's memory because he lost the chance to sell her off to a high bidder just like he is trying to do with her.
Consumed by a sudden and violent rage, Gerald physically attacks Laura.
He brutally crushes her hand and calls her a filthy, disgusting insect that needs to be stepped on until it learns its place.
As she screams in absolute agony from the injury, Gerald demands that she apologize for her insolence immediately.
He forces her to promise on her life that she will marry Tom Price and save the family business. Unable to endure the searing physical pain any longer, Laura's spirit finally yields. She tells him in a broken voice that she will do exactly as he wishes and accept the suitor, giving him the victory he wanted.
And, the loyal maid, rushes into the room the moment Gerald leaves, having overheard the screams and the sounds of the struggle from the hallway.
She is terrified by what she finds and tries to comfort her mistress. Horrified by the bruised and mangled state of Laura's hand, and begs her to reconsider everything. She pleads with Laura to flee the house tonight and become a governess as they had planned before this nightmare escalated. Laura remains chillingly composed despite the trauma, asking and to help her find an alluring dress that can hide the hideous injuries on her hand. She is already planning her appearance for the ball with a cold focus. She tells Anne not to worry, declaring with a somber and final resolve that the upcoming ball will be her very last appearance in high society. She is preparing for an end that no one else in the Pendleton house expects. The social event of the year finally kicks off at the Lance estate as the elite members of society gather under sparkling chandeliers for a night defined by glamour and high-stakes social warfare. Laura makes an entrance that leaves every guest in the room completely stunned as her dramatic and radiant transformation makes her look like a goddess returned to earth. The crowd can't believe their eyes, whispering that she looks exactly like the girl from her debut years ago, reclaiming her title as the most beautiful lady in the room.
Behind her flawless mask, Laura is breathing a secret sigh of relief because her uniquely heavy styling and makeup successfully hide her terrible complexion caused by her uncle's recent brutality.
Dora Lance greets her with total shock, admitting she almost failed to recognize her own friend because her appearance is so exceptionally vibrant and radiant tonight. The ladies exchange polite compliments about their attire, and Dora proudly reveals that her own dress was custom-made by a world-famous tailor in France specifically for this gala. Seeing the spotlight fixed on Laura, Miss Donovan tries to subtly push her away by suggesting her legs must be exhausted and she should go hide in the retiring room.
Laura immediately realizes that her stunning presence is making the younger debutantes feel threatened and insecure, but she politely refuses to leave the main floor.
Dora steps up to defend Laura against the petty jealousy of her social circle, insisting that the entire ball would be far less graceful without Laura's presence gracing the room. To prevent any more social clashes, Dora asks Laura to stay by her side as a companion since neither of them has chosen a dance partner for the opening waltz. The gathered gossips watch with fascination as Dora turns down multiple suitors, fueling the rumor that she is only waiting for the arrival of the legendary billionaire lord. The conversation turns to the famous painting of Whitefield Hall, and Laura publicly confirms that Ian Dalton actually gave her the private masterpiece as a personal gift. While everyone else gushes over Ian's handsome looks, one guest brings up the suspicious and hurried events of the picnic where Laura was seen fleeing into the forest. The group questions if something serious happened between the two that day, but Laura tries to play it cool by claiming he was just returning a handkerchief she had dropped. Her uncharacteristic hesitation and flustered reaction immediately give her away, making the women suspect that a much deeper and more tragic secret is being kept hidden from them. The room suddenly falls quiet when the Fairfax family and Ian Dalton finally make their entrance, and the tension between Ian and Laura becomes almost physically heavy. Ian's expression is chillingly serious as he locks eyes with Laura, and guests begin to theorize that he may have rejected her after finally learning about her true lineage. The gossip mills start churning with stories of a tragic affair and a broken heart, as the city elite watch the cold interaction between the Lord and the Matchmaker.
Guests wonder why a man who was once close enough to gift a painting would now look at her with such a frightening expression, suggesting a major argument has taken place. The theories about a fight or an argument grow louder, as high society realizes that such drama only happens when there are real and deep feelings involved between two people.
As the first waltz is announced, Ian suddenly vanishes from the main room, leaving the socialites baffled about where the star of the evening has disappeared to as the music begins. Ian moves through the mansion to escape the crowd and eventually spots Laura in a quieter area, but his heart stops when he finds her standing next to another man. On a quiet terrace draped in moonlight, away from the suffocating noise of the main ball, Mr. Price approaches Laura Pendleton. He expresses his sincere gratitude for her willingness to meet him in private, acknowledging that he truly wanted a moment to speak with her alone. Price offers his deepest thanks for the extraordinary kindness Laura showed to Joanne Jensen. He notes that her mentorship allowed the American lady to successfully navigate and flourish in the incredibly strict and judgmental circles of London society.
Seeing Joanne tonight made him realize she has become a perfect London lady, and he admits that this transformation is entirely thanks to Laura's guidance.
Laura modestly tries to downplay her role, claiming she simply shared a cheerful friendship with the heiress.
Mr.
Price admits that after hearing the truth from Joanne last night, he faced a difficult choice.
He could have rushed to Gerald Pendleton to demand an answer for the deception, but he chose instead to wait a night and hear the explanation directly from Laura's own lips.
With a heavy heart, Price asks for the absolute truth.
He looks at her and asks if it is true that she never once, not even for a single fleeting moment, harbored any romantic interest in marrying him. The silence on the balcony is heavy with anticipation. Laura remains brutally honest and confirms that she has never felt any romantic affection for him. This admission leaves Mr. Price feeling utterly disgraced by his own past behavior, and he begins to reflect on the disgraceful way he has pursued her until now. Overwhelmed with a deep sense of shame, Price offers a sincere apology for his actions. He admits he was a complete fool for blindly believing Gerald Pendleton's words without question, realizing now how much he let himself be manipulated. He confesses that he was thoroughly bewitched by Gerald's schemes. It turns out everything was nothing more than a carefully devised bait intended to extract funds from him to save the reckless and failing ventures of Gerald's eldest son.
Price reveals that he learned the grim truth upon his arrival in England.
Not only was the business plan in total shambles, but the Pendletons had already ruined their family name through repeated failures and mounting debt. He admits that because he was blinded by his desire for Laura, he fell for the most obvious of tricks. He was prepared to invest an enormous sum of money into Gerald's failing scheme just to ensure that the uncle would let him have her hand in marriage. Deeply remorseful for the distress he caused her, Price shares his plan to leave for America immediately the next morning and never return to England. He begs for her forgiveness, acknowledging that his pursuit was a source of great pain for her. Price makes one final plea as a friend, begging Laura to sail away with him to the States. He admits he cannot comfortably leave her behind under the supposed protection of a man as cruel and manipulative as Gerald Pendleton. Laura firmly refuses the offer, asserting that she will not remain in her uncle's shadow forever.
She asks him to bid her farewell with peace of mind, as she is already planning her own path toward a new life where her current identity has ended.
As she watches him depart, she reflects on the impending collapse of her uncle's house. She knows that by tomorrow, Price will withdraw his investment, Gerald's schemes will fall into ruin, and she will be the one held responsible for the family's destruction.
Laura experiences a sharp, stinging pang of physical pain in her injured hand, a reminder of her uncle's previous assault.
She worries that when the news of Price's departure hits tomorrow, Gerald's reaction will be even more violent and dangerous than before.
Her dark thoughts are suddenly interrupted by the appearance of Ian Dalton, who has been searching everywhere for her. Laura is startled to see him and wonders how long he has been standing there, watching her in the quiet of the terrace.
Ian asks for the dance lesson he requested the other day, claiming he is terrified of making a dreadful mistake by stepping on a lady's foot during the waltz. Laura is relieved that he apparently didn't overhear her intense talk with Mr. Price. Laura decides to grant his request while the terrace remains private, accepting his hand for the waltz.
She realizes with a heavy heart that this dance will be her final moment of happiness before leaving her life as an earl's daughter behind forever.
On the quiet terrace, Laura Pendleton playfully critiques Ian Dalton's dancing skills. She notes that he has maintained his movements well enough since their last lesson, managing to avoid becoming a typical socialite playboy. Ian jokes that his natural rhythm is actually so poor that he should probably retire from high society balls altogether. He suggests that he should only ever take dancing lessons from Laura rather than embarrassing himself in public. Laura reassures him that any lady in London would be lucky to have him as a dance partner. She decides to shift the lesson from footwork to the delicate art of charming a woman with words. She advises him to mask his blunt and peculiar nature by focusing on delivering detailed and sincere compliments. She explains that a lady's interest is caught by a gentleman who notices the small details. Taking her advice to heart immediately, Ian practices his new skills on Laura. He praises the way her sky blue dress and the pearls woven into her hair accentuate her natural beauty, making his gaze feel incredibly personal.
Laura finds his sudden attempts at charm surprisingly effective and admits she doesn't mind being the subject of his practice.
She tells him that a sincere tribute to beauty is always a welcome gesture for any lady.
As they move in perfect rhythm, a wave of sudden sadness washes over Laura.
She realizes with a heavy heart that this might be the final time she ever gets to dance with Ian as a social equal before her world collapses.
The peaceful atmosphere is suddenly shattered when Ian reveals a shocking secret. He tells her that he knows all about her hidden plan to abandon her family and seek a future as an independent governess. Laura is stunned that her most private intentions have leaked out to the ton. She quickly deduces that the source of the leak must have been Mr. Fairfax, the only person close enough to have pieced together her mystery. Ian proposes an unexpected and generous solution to her problem. He offers her a professional position teaching his two young nephews, Daniel and George, at the prestigious Dunville Park. Laura considers the life-changing offer very carefully. While she knows she would be treated with respect, she admits she is not yet mentally ready to leave her dying grandmother's side during these final days.
She also harbors a secret and painful fear about the arrangement.
Staying at Ian's family estate would force her to eventually face his future wife, a prospect that brings her more agony than she can handle. Seeing her visible hesitation, Ian tries to make the offer more appealing. He promises to discipline the rowdy boys himself to ensure her work environment is as peaceful and easy as possible. Laura asks for more time to weigh her options, and Ian graciously tells her there is absolutely no pressure. On the inside, however, he is internally desperate for her to accept his protection. As the waltz continues, Ian uses their close proximity to study Laura's face intensely. He senses that something is terribly and fundamentally wrong beneath her perfectly composed social exterior.
Having earlier overheard the ugly truth about Gerald Pendleton's cruelty, Ian burns with a protective rage.
He wants to drop all pretenses and tell her that he belongs entirely to her. He wishes he could beg her to stay by his side not just as a dear friend, but as his lover and his future wife.
He is ready to give his all for her sake, but he fears scaring her away forever.
The dream is ruined when a sharp cry of agony escapes Laura's lips as Ian touches her injured hand.
The dance stops instantly as Ian sees her suffering and demands she seek medical help for the injury she tried so hard to hide. Laura tries to lie and call it a simple sprain, but Ian is visibly upset and demands she seek medical help immediately.
Despite the searing pain, Laura begs him to finish the song, wanting to hold on to this last happy memory until the very end.
As their waltz finally draws to a close, Ian Dalton catches a brief but unmistakable glimpse of an earnest feeling in Laura's eyes.
He wonders if his own persistence has finally begun to crack her stone-cold exterior, and if she might be starting to feel even a tiny bit of affection for him.
Claiming that she is completely exhausted from their long and intense dance, Laura attempts to retreat to the sanctuary of the ladies' lounge alone.
She even encourages Ian to stop following her and find a new dance partner among the many younger ladies eagerly waiting for his attention.
Ian refuses to let her simply walk away into the shadows. He stops her right there on the terrace to express his deep and visible concern for her well-being, sensing that her physical exhaustion is just a mask for a much deeper emotional pain.
He reminds her of the solemn vow he once made to her in a letter, that he would be her most faithful servant until the very end.
He promises her with absolute sincerity that no matter what happens or what social storm arrives, he will always remain firmly on her side.
For a split second, Laura feels a desperate and crushing urge to confess every harsh humiliation and every drop of disgrace she has suffered at the hands of her cruel family.
But instead, she swallows her pride, offers a simple thank you, and continues her lonely walk toward the ladies' lounge.
The lounge is packed with the city's socialites, making it impossible for Laura to find true privacy. She is forced to take a seat near a group of women who are busy whispering about the season's most anticipated romantic matches and scandalous rumors. She overhears the ladies discussing Miss Dora Lance's recent dance with Mr. Fairfax. They dismiss it as a total waste of the young lady's time, comparing it unfavorably to the royal standard pairing everyone expects between her and the billionaire Ian Dalton. The gossips in the room confidently predict that Dora Lance is destined to become the next Mrs. Dalton before the autumn season even comes to an end. They speak as if the marriage contract is already signed and just waiting for the ink to dry. Laura is momentarily stunned by the sheer confidence of their news.
She finds herself wondering if the two have already entered into a secret engagement behind the scenes, while she was busy managing the chaos of her own household and her dying grandmother.
However, her sharp matchmaker's instincts quickly notice a massive contradiction in their stories.
The women begin to wonder aloud when Ian actually plans to make the proposal public, allowing Laura to realize that the engagement is nothing more than a social fantasy.
Laura recognizes the grave danger these public rumors pose to a young debutante. She knows that if a formal marriage doesn't occur soon, Miss Lance's reputation will be permanently tarnished and ruined by the very gossip currently lifting her up. Driven by a sense of professional duty and genuine concern for her friend, Laura decides to act immediately. She seeks out Miss Lance in a quiet and secluded corner of the ball to address the scandalous talk and the dangerous assumptions directly. She asks Dora point-blank and without any sugarcoating if she is actually engaged to Mr. Dalton. To her surprise, she receives a startled and very emphatic denial from the young woman, who seems completely unaware of how far the rumors have spread. Laura warns her that her supposed friends are already speaking of the marriage as an absolute certainty in the crowded lounge. She makes it clear that this level of public expectation is putting Dora's entire social standing at extreme risk. Pressing further to find the root of the problem, Laura asks if Ian has ever sent a formal letter of intent or clearly hinted at a future marriage prospect. She needs to know if Ian is accidentally leading the girl on or if Dora is dreaming alone. Dora admits that while he hasn't spoken a single word about marriage, his constant presence at her tea parties and his gift of a hand-drawn portrait led her to believe he was interested. She mistook his polite attendance for a romantic pursuit. Realizing that Dora has fundamentally mistaken Ian's strategic attendance and artistic gifts for a true romantic interest, Laura prepares to deliver a dose of reality. She decides to share a sobering story about the hidden risks of London's high society. She begins to recount the tragic tale of a shy and naive debutante from several years ago who lost her heart to a man. She explains how that girl believed in a fairy tale, only to find that it was the beginning of her ultimate social ruin. As the music of the ball plays in the background, Laura's story serves as a chilling warning. She tells Dora to look beyond the surface of a gentleman's actions before her own reputation becomes a sacrificial lamb for the gossip of the ton. Laura begins recounting a tragic story to Miss Lance about a woman who was once the shining star of high society. This woman fell so deeply in love that she chose to ignore the clear and present dangers of public gossip, believing her happiness was permanent. The couple became inseparable, appearing together at every ball, tea party, and concert until their names were linked by everyone in the ton.
However, her brief moment of pure joy ended abruptly when the man suddenly vanished without a single word of explanation.
2 months after his disappearance, the social world was rocked by news that the man had married a wealthy heiress.
He left his former lover in total disgrace, turning her into a laughingstock, while she was still reeling from the emotional betrayal.
Despite her immense emotional pain, the woman's parents were merciless and forced her to continue attending social events. She was cruelly labeled a mistress and a social pariah, forced to endure the whispers and pointed fingers of her peers. Broken and permanently wounded by the scandal, the woman eventually married a much older foreigner as a last resort. She was ultimately forced to flee England entirely to escape her ruined reputation and live out her days in exile. Laura explains to Miss Lance that the woman's ultimate downfall was caused by her own foolishness. She allowed love to blind her to the harsh and unforgiving reality of the social world they inhabit, leading to her total destruction. Miss Lance feels deeply insulted by the comparison, viewing Laura's story as a direct warning that her own behavior with Ian Dalton is reckless. She finds the tale offensive and refuses to see the parallel to her own life. Instead of taking the warning to heart, Dora convinces herself that her situation is unique. She is certain that Ian harbors genuine feelings for her and that their connection is far more stable than the one in Laura's tragic story. Rationalizing the encounter, Miss Lance decides that Laura is merely acting out of petty jealousy. She believes Laura is bitter after being rejected by Ian and is trying to sabotage Dora's happiness with a scary ghost story. Meanwhile, Laura returns to the Pendleton townhouse, mentally bracing herself for a violent confrontation with her uncle.
She expects Gerald to be furious after her display of defiance at the ball earlier that evening.
Upon entering, she is immediately met with a grim and heavy atmosphere. She finds Dr. Webster at the estate, who delivers the devastating news that her grandmother has suffered a major collapse and is near death. The doctor warns Laura that the elderly woman has only a few days left to live at most.
Laura is left in shock, desperately wondering what could have caused such a sudden and terrifying decline in her grandmother's health.
Anne, the loyal maid, finally reveals the horrifying truth.
She tells Laura that Lady Abigail's collapse was not natural, but was triggered by a vicious and screaming argument with Uncle Gerald earlier that day.
In a flashback, the grandmother is shown furiously confronting Gerald for his greed.
She slams him for trying to sell Laura off to a man nearly old enough to be in a coffin just to save his own failing business deals. Lady Abigail threatens to throw her entire fortune into the River Thames rather than let Gerald profit from ruining Laura's life. She is determined to protect her granddaughter's future from her son's cold-hearted schemes. The argument turns deeply personal as Gerald accuses his mother of always favoring his sister Dolores over him. He sneers at the idea of her leaving her fortune to Laura, whom he views as a replacement for his hated sister. The grandmother pleads with Gerald to show even a shred of human mercy. She begs him to leave at least a small portion of the inheritance to his niece so she isn't left completely destitute after her death. In a final act of absolute cruelty, Gerald vows that once his mother is gone, he will bar Laura from ever seeing her body or visiting her grave. This ultimate threat of isolation causes the elder